My wife demanded half of everything I owned in the divorce after rekindling things with her ex, so I disappeared without a trace. I had thought my life couldn't possibly get any worse, but I was wrong. The entire week at work had been miserable, and to make matters worse, the company president called me into his office to reprimand me for a mistake someone else had made. When I finally got home, my frustration only deepened. My sister-in-law's car was blocking my driveway, leaving me no choice but to park 3 houses down since the neighbor's teenage son and his friends had taken up all the street parking. As I walked toward the house, I wondered why I even bothered. My relationship with my wife's sister, Melanie, had always been tense. She had disliked me from the moment we met, though I never understood why. Adding to my frustration, I knew an intimate evening with my wife, Claire, was out of the question. Despite my efforts, we hadn't been together in nearly a month. Reaching my driveway, I noticed an empty garbage can near the curb and dragged it around the side of the house, leaving it by the back door before stepping inside. From the kitchen, I could hear music and the sound of Claire and Melanie chatting in the living room. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, took a sip, and started toward them until something I overheard stopped me cold. God, he screwed me 3 times today. The words weren't Melanie's, they were my wife's. Ever since Tyler came back last month, I just can't get enough of him, Claire confessed. Tyler, her ex, the one who had left her and moved away, Melanie asked. So, what are you going to do now? Melanie continued. Claire's response shattered whatever remained of my composure. Tyler wants me to move in with him, so we'll get a lawyer and file for divorce. This is a community property state, so he'll get half of everything. That was all I needed to hear. Numbly, I turned away, retracing my steps to the car and sinking into the driver's seat. The reality hit me. She had been rejecting me because she was giving herself to someone else, and now she wanted half of everything I had worked for. The worst part, the law would probably let her have it. Claire and I had been married for just 3 years. She quit her job right after our wedding, and despite being home all day, she never lifted a finger around the house to keep things in order. I hired a maid 3 times a week to handle the cleaning and laundry. On those days, Claire would cook dinner, but the rest of the time, either I cooked or she ordered takeout. I know what you might be thinking, but love blinded me. She kept me satisfied with good sex, at least until a month ago. Losing my father when I was 13 had been devastating for both my mother and me, but Mom did her best to raise me right, and we became very close. When a drunk driver took her life when I was 23, it was another crushing blow, one that happened just a year before I met Claire. I inherited nearly $1.8 million from her, and with the help of a skilled broker, I kept it wisely invested. While Claire tried to spend every dime I earned, I never touched that inheritance, allowing it to grow even in a shaky economy. Between that and the hundreds of thousands I had in savings, I was financially secure. But my biggest mistake? Letting love cloud my judgment. We skipped a prenuptial agreement, believing our marriage would last forever. Now, thanks to that oversight, Claire could walk away with nearly $1.2 million, all for the privilege of betraying me. And the state would back her up every step of the way. She had mentioned getting a lawyer, meaning she wasn't quite ready to serve me yet. That gave me time to act. Sitting in my car, I watched through the rearview mirror until I saw my sister-in-law drive away. Then I started the car, made a U-turn, and pulled into my driveway. Claire was nowhere to be seen when I stepped inside, so I headed to the kitchen for another beer. As I popped the top and took a long sip, I contemplated my next move. Oh, there you are, honey, Claire greeted as she entered the kitchen. I didn't hear you come in. Hello, dear. Just got in. Long day? I replied with a warm smile, determined to play my role as convincingly as she played hers. I didn't have time to order anything for dinner, she pouted. I wanted to say, that's because you spent the day screwing your boyfriend and giving your sister all the details. But instead, I simply said, that's okay, sweetie, we'll just heat up some leftovers from last night. She flashed me a sweet smile, kissed my cheek, and announced she was heading upstairs for a hot bath. Yeah, got to wash all that off, I thought. Once she was gone, I grabbed a plate of cold fried rice and downed 2 more beers. After tossing the empty container, I retreated to the den, flipping through channels until I landed on an old movie. Claire returned about half an hour later, settling onto the couch. When the movie ended, she stood, stretched, and sighed. I'm exhausted. I'm heading to bed. Tired from cheating? I wanted to ask, but instead, I simply nodded. I'll watch the news and join you later. I hadn't really been watching the movie, My mind was too occupied planning my next move. But I knew one thing. Until Monday, there wasn't much I could do. So I endured the next few days. Saturday, I busied myself working in the yard. Sunday, I played golf with my buddies. But in the back of my mind, the plan was already forming. On Monday, I called my broker and instructed him to liquidate my entire inheritance portfolio. Being in upper management gave me the leverage to cash out my 401k quickly, penalty be damned. By Thursday, I was ready to make my move. That evening, I returned home to my supposedly loving wife and informed her of an urgent situation at work, explaining that I'd be flying out for a week on company business. I packed 2 suitcases. That was all I needed. When we first moved into this house, I had stored away everything important to me. None of it fit her taste, so she never bothered with it. That made things easier. The furniture, the decorations, all of it had been her choices, and I couldn't care less about leaving them behind. The silver lining in all of this? We were renting. I had no financial stake in the house, and since I had recently sold my condo, we had been in the process of finding her dream home. So far, nothing had met her impossibly high standards. On Friday morning, I kissed Claire on the cheek one last time, picked up my suitcases, and walked out the door. I loaded them into my Audi, got behind the wheel, and drove away without a single glance back. My first stop was at my old buddy Greg's place. I trusted him completely, and when I proposed trading my car for his older but fully rebuilt 4-wheel drive vehicle, he was stunned. I confided in him about my situation, and an hour later, I was headed west in my new ride. Greg promised to keep my Audi hidden in his garage for a while. That alone would make it difficult for anyone to track me. For the next 4 days, I paid for everything in cash. I had canceled all our credit cards to erase my financial footprint. The majority of my money was now safely stored in an offshore account, thanks to my broker. I had also set up a system with him for future fund transfers whenever needed. Meanwhile, I carried enough cash stashed in the SUV to last me a while. The hardest part was the nights alone in motels. For the past week, I had been too busy executing my plan to dwell on what had happened to me. But now, in the silence of those motel rooms, it hit me. I had loved Claire. I wouldn't have married her if I hadn't. I replayed every what-if scenario in my head, trying to see if I could have done anything differently. But in the end, I came to the same conclusion. Even if I had known her ex was back in town, I doubt I could have stopped them from getting back together. And then it hit me. I had been a fool. She had probably never truly loved me. By the 5th day, I found myself sitting in a small-town diner in Wyoming, drinking coffee and staring blankly out the window. By now, Claire must have realized all her credit cards had been canceled and that our bank accounts were empty. I wondered how she was handling the shock. My thoughts were interrupted by the quiet conversation of an older couple at the next table. The man, who looked to be in his late 50s, was speaking to his auburn-haired wife about their farm. He was wishing for an extra set of hands, but unfortunately, they couldn't afford to hire anyone until their calves were ready for market. Even then, finding someone willing to work for what they could pay was proving to be a challenge. Finishing the last bite of my meal, I stood up and approached their table. "I'm sorry for overhearing," I said, "but I think I might be able to help." The older man studied me carefully, sizing me up. "I don't see how you could do that. If you heard our conversation, you know I can't pay you anything. What if I'm just looking for a place to stay in exchange for my labor?" I offered. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Karen, excuse us for a moment," he said to his wife before rising from his seat. I followed him outside into the parking lot, where our conversation could remain private. Now that we stood face to face, I took in his appearance more closely. He was about my height, 6 feet, with broad shoulders and not a trace of excess weight. His once dark hair had turned mostly gray, and his weathered face bore the marks of years spent working outdoors. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, his voice edged with suspicion. "You part of that Crestwood ranch?" I raised my hands in a gesture of innocence. "Hold on there, mister. I don't know anything about any Crestwood. A few days ago, I was living in Texas. I just got here this morning. I figured maybe we could help each other out." He eyed me for a long moment before replying. "If that's true, why would you want to help us?" I shrugged. "I already told you. I'm just looking for a place to lay low for a while. If you have a place, I can stay. It'll repay you with my labor. It'll cover my own expenses, and if I'm not any help, just say the word, and it'll be on my way. No hard feelings." He studied my face for a long moment before nodding slowly. "If you're telling the truth, I'd be a fool not to at least give you a shot. But I have to warn you, The Crestwoods have been trying to get me to sell my land. They haven't done anything underhanded yet, but I wouldn't put it past them. You might be biting off more than you can chew. I shrugged. That's a risk I'm willing to take. He then asked about my experience with ranch work. I was honest, told him I had spent a few summers helping out on my uncle's place in Texas, but that I wasn't a cowboy by any stretch. He considered that for a second, then extended his hand. Name's Bill. I shook his hand firmly. Carter. With that, we had an agreement. Back inside the diner, Bill introduced me to his wife, Karen. This is Carter. He's going to be working for us, if he can handle it. She stood and extended her hand. Nice to meet you, Carter, she greeted warmly. It's very nice to meet you. Her voice had a distinct clarity with maybe the faintest trace of an Irish accent. Like her husband, she was lean and fit, a woman who had clearly spent her life working hard. Nice to meet you too, ma'am, I said politely. She smiled. Last name's O'Reilly, but you can just call me Karen. We don't have much use for formality around here. I liked her immediately. Before heading to the ranch, Bill made a quick stop at a general store. We both stepped out of our vehicles, and Bill suggested I pick up some clothes better suited for ranch work. As we stepped into the store, the owner greeted him warmly, making it clear Bill was a regular. I grabbed a coat and a pair of Western-style riding boots, enough to last me for the time being. From the general store, it was about a 20-minute drive to the ranch. As we approached the main gate, an arch with the name Red Rock Ranch came into view. Bill's brand. A private road stretched another mile before leading up to the main house, which sat on a rise. The two-story home was well-maintained, freshly painted, and framed by a barn and several outbuildings. I noticed the O'Reillys' pickup was partly loaded with sacks of groceries, likely from their weekly supply run. I pulled up behind them, grabbed as many bags as I could carry, and followed them into the kitchen. Within 2 trips, we had the truck unloaded. Bill then instructed me to drive around back, where he showed me a small cabin where I'd be staying. As I pulled up, I spotted him waiting outside. When I stepped out of the vehicle, he gestured toward the cabin and mentioned that another hand, Sam, lived in a similar cabin just a few yards away. Sam was currently out making his rounds, but I'd meet him later. I carried my bags inside and took a moment to get a feel for the place. It was simple but clean. One large room with a bed against the wall, a small table with 2 chairs, and a potbelly with stove in the corner. A modest bathroom featured a single stone shower. It wasn't luxurious, but it was enough for now. Most importantly, it was far from Claire and anyone looking for me. When I stepped back outside, Bill was already in his pickup. Hop in, he said, and I climbed into the passenger seat. He took me on a tour of the ranch, which spanned nearly 5,000 acres, mostly used for grazing, with a couple hundred acres set aside for growing winter feed. The back section of the property was rugged, covered in forest, and stretched toward the mountains, with a stream running through it, only accessible on horseback. Bill explained that he used to have 3 full-time ranch hands, but after some tough times, only Sam remained. Sam had been working the ranch for nearly 30 years, and when it came time for roundups or selecting stock for market, they hired extra help. By the time Bill dropped me off at the cabin, the sun was starting to set. By the way, he said before driving off, I noticed you have a laptop. I've got a satellite connection with a router, so you can access the internet wirelessly. Supper's in the main house. We eat at 6. I took a few minutes to settle in before booting up my laptop. As Bill had mentioned, I was able to connect to the internet. I checked my emails, and one message caught my eye. It was from Greg. Claire reported you missing. Cops are investigating. I leaned back in my chair, mulling over the news. It wasn't entirely unexpected, but it was something to think about. Greg was the only one who knew I had left, and even he didn't know where I had gone. I had mailed my resignation to my employer, but never officially informed them in person. I had covered my tracks well, or so I had thought. Just before 6, I made my way to the main house and knocked on the door. Bill called for me to come in, and as I stepped inside, I saw Karen preparing dinner while Bill stood off to the side, chatting with a man I assumed was Sam. Sam, this is Carter, the new hand I mentioned. At least for today, we'll see how he feels about it after a day's work tomorrow, he added with a broad grin. Carter, meet Sam. Sam greeted me with a warm smile and extended his hand. He was a big man, at least 6'4", and like Bill, he looked like someone who had spent his life working hard. They seemed to be around the same age, though one thing stood out. Sam was African American. I shook his hand, immediately noting the strength in his grip. Well, young man, let's hope you like it here. I could use the help, he said. At 29, I was nearly half his age, so I understood why he called me young. I planned to give it my best shot. Just then, Karen called us to the table, announcing that supper was ready. Bill and Karen sat at opposite ends, leaving Sam and me to sit between them across from each other. The spread on the table was hearty: pork chops piled on a platter, a large bowl of mashed potatoes, fresh green beans, and a plate stacked high with homemade biscuits. "We don't do fancy here, Carter, but there's plenty and it's filling," Karen said. "It looks great," I replied. As we ate, I asked Bill if he'd lived here all his life. "Yep. My grandfather started this ranch and passed it on to my father. Now it belongs to Karen and me. Though when I was younger, I wasn't so sure she was going to be part of it. I had to fight off every man in town to get her," he said with a grin. I glanced at Karen and saw the warmth in Bill's eyes as he looked at her. She smiled and replied, "Now, Bill, you know you were the only man I ever had eyes for. I just had to make sure you wanted me enough." Bill chuckled. "My wife is responsible for the 3 happiest days of my life: the day she agreed to marry me, the day she actually did, and the day she gave birth to our daughter, Lily." I hadn't seen any sign of a daughter around, and Karen must have noticed my curious expression. "Our daughter's away right now, finishing her doctorate in veterinary sciences at Colorado State University. She's only been home for the holidays, but we're eagerly waiting for her to come back with her degree. Should cut down on some of the vet bills around here," Bill added with a chuckle. After dinner, I offered to help clear the table, but Karen shooed me away, insisting it was her job. Bill mentioned that breakfast was at 5:30 and work started at 6. As Sam and I headed out, I noticed a copy of that day's New York Times sitting on the counter, probably picked up by Bill in town. I asked if I could borrow the front page, and he agreed. Once outside, I asked Sam to step into my cabin for a moment. Inside, I took out my digital camera and showed him how to use it. He took a close-up shot of me holding the newspaper, though I could tell he was curious about why. He didn't press the issue, though he did ask if I had an alarm clock. I assured him I did. "See you in the morning," he said before heading to his own cabin. I downloaded the picture onto my computer and attached it to an email address to the police in my former hometown. The message was short and to the point. I was alive and well, and I had left of my own free will. Choosing a national newspaper instead of a local one ensured my location remained ambiguous. I sent the email to Greg, instructing him to use a local coffee shop with free internet access since my work email was likely still active. I provided my password so he could forward the original message and photo to the police without leaving a traceable path. With any luck, this would keep me off FBI or national missing persons lists, assuming law enforcement wouldn't dedicate significant resources to tracking down a runaway husband. That night, I slept soundly. By 5 a.m., I was up, showered, and dressed in time to walk with Sam to the main house for breakfast. After breakfast, Bill assigned me to work with Sam replacing fence posts in the hilly section of the ranch. At the barn, Sam pointed out the horse and saddle I'd be using. I could tell he was watching to see if I knew what I was doing, but he seemed satisfied with the way I saddled the big brown gelding, drawing on my experience from my uncle's ranch. We packed 2 mules with supplies, fence posts, a post hole digger, and other necessary tools. Bill joined us, carrying a Winchester Model 94 in a saddle scabbard, mainly for the rare occasion we might have to put down a sick cow, he explained. With Sam leading one of the mules, we mounted up and rode out, following the creek into the hills. As we rode, we talked, gradually getting to know each other. I shared the story of how I ended up in Wyoming, trusting that Sam wouldn't betray my confidence. In return, he told me about his own past, how he'd married right out of high school, only to walk in on his wife with another man. In a fit of rage, he nearly beat the guy to death, which earned him a 5-year prison sentence. When he got out, Bill was the only one willing to give him a second chance, and he'd been at the ranch ever since. "Bill and Karen," Sam said with admiration, "they're the salt of the earth." About half an hour later, we reached the property boundary. Sam pointed out that not all the fence posts needed replacing, only the ones that had rotted or were close to failing, which was roughly every third one. He stayed with me while I set the first 2, making sure I had the process down. Then he gave me a rough schedule: work until around 4, allowing time to return, tend to the animals, and make it to dinner by 6. "Follow the stream back down," he advised. "That way you won't get lost." With that, he headed back, leaving me alone to work. I made steady progress along the fence line, replacing the old posts with new ones. At noon, I took a break, retrieving the pork chop sandwiches Karen had packed for me from my saddlebag. After eating, I got back to work. By 4 p.m., my watch alarm beeped, signaling the end of the day. I had managed to set nearly all the posts we had brought up. Leading the mules, I followed the fence line until I found the stream and began making my way down. Just before leaving the trees, I came across a natural pool where the stream flowed in and out. I paused, taking in the view. It was the most peaceful, breathtaking spot I'd seen on the ranch so far. Back at the barn, I unsaddled the horse and mules, ensuring they were fed and cared for before heading inside. While I worked, Sam arrived to bed down his own horse. We hurried to wash up and change before supper, where we enjoyed steak that evening. Exhausted from the day's labor, I barely contributed to the conversation. As soon as we finished eating, I excused myself and headed straight to bed. Sleep came quickly, and I slept deeply. When I woke, every muscle ached. My hands throbbed from gripping the post hole digger, and my arms, shoulders, and legs protested with each movement. Despite my regular workouts, a 2-hour gym session was nothing compared to a full day of setting fence posts. As I limped into the kitchen and winced while sitting down, Bill and Sam chuckled, and even Karen couldn't quite hide her grin. Still, soreness did little to curb my appetite. I was ravenous and eagerly devoured my breakfast, ready for another day of fencing. Bill asked as we rose from the table, "You ready to go again?" I groaned. "Yes, sir," I replied, trying to sound more optimistic than I felt. Bill laughed. "I think you can give it a rest today. Ride the rounds with Sam." I nodded, grateful for the reprieve. The morning started with cleaning stalls and replacing hay after turning the horses and mules out to pasture and filling their feeders. Sam and I loaded into the pickup to inspect the ranch. Our primary goal was to check for any downed cattle or calves that had wandered too far from their mothers. Sam's knowledge of the ranch was almost instinctual. After 30 years, he could predict where the cattle would be and estimate their numbers without much effort. As we reached the far end of the property, he stopped the truck, scanning the hills. Something caught his attention, and he handed me his binoculars, pointing toward a distant spot. It took me a moment, but I finally saw them, 2 calves standing alone. "Where are their mothers?" I asked. Sam gestured toward the tree line. "Over there." The calves must have wandered in, got turned around, and just kept going. "We have to bring them down?" I asked. Sam chuckled. "Not too far. We'll go back and load up a couple of horses." Using the pickup's 2-way radio, Sam called Bill to fill him in. By the time we returned to the barn, Bill had already saddled 2 horses and loaded them into a trailer. All we had to do was grab our gear and head out. We drove to a clearing near the tree line, unloaded the horses, and rode into the hills. Sam's experience was evident. He knew the terrain like the back of his hand. About half an hour later, we eased up behind the calves, guiding them gently downhill. As soon as we broke through the trees and the calves spotted their mothers, they bolted. As they ran, I couldn't help but laugh as they rushed to their moms and immediately started nursing. The cows stood patiently, letting their young feed, a simple yet striking contrast to my own childhood. That evening, supper was fried chicken, corn on the cob, and mashed potatoes. With renewed energy, I was far more talkative than the night before. I learned more about Karen. Her parents had immigrated from Ireland when she was 5. Her father, fascinated by the legends of the Old West, had moved the family to Wyoming. That explained the slight Irish lilt that still lingered in her speech. Despite growing up in America, Karen's accent had never fully disappeared, and I could tell it made her proud. The next day, I returned to fencing after breakfast. Sam helped me load up the mules, but this time, I headed out on my own, following the stream. I reached my destination without trouble. This day was much easier than the first. I had picked up a few tricks to make the work less strenuous. Just before 4, I set the final post and headed back to the barn. With some extra time, I worked on a few stalls before cleaning up for dinner. On my 4th day, I assisted Sam in repairing some of the buildings, and the following day, I was back to setting fence posts. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, 2 months had flown by. By then, I was alternating with Sam to ride the ranch and check on the cattle. I was in the best shape of my life. We had settled into a schedule. Sam took Saturdays off, Bill took Sundays, and Mondays were mine. On my day off, I usually caught up on laundry and ran into town if needed. I had grown fond of everyone on the ranch. Sam was good-natured and easygoing, and we often sat and talked after supper. I respected Bill. He was honest, hardworking, and we got along well. Karen was always sweet to Sam and me, but I could see she had a bit of fire in her. Together, she and Bill made a great couple. At breakfast on Friday, Karen and Bill were unusually excited. Karen informed me that their daughter, Lily, would be returning home in a week. That day, it was my turn to ride through the wooded section, checking for any cattle that had wandered into the hills. A little after 4, I made my way to the stream and followed it down until I reached the pool below the waterfall. Stopping for a moment, I dismounted, took off my shirt, and knelt by the water, dipping my bandana into the cool stream. I wiped the sweat and dust from my face and neck. A rustling sound from downstream caught my attention. Turning my head, I spotted a horse and rider approaching. At first, I thought it was Karen, but as they got closer, I realized it was a younger version of her. She had the same striking crystal blue eyes and vibrant red hair. This had to be Lily. She pulled up a few feet away from me and fixed me with an icy stare. "Who are you, and what are you doing on this property?" I stood up to face her. "Name's Carter. I work here." She narrowed her eyes. "I don't believe you. My dad said he couldn't afford to hire another hand." Despite her beauty, her unfriendly tone rubbed me the wrong way. "Yeah, I heard that too," I replied dryly. "Guess that's why I laugh all the way to the bank every payday." She stared at me for a moment before turning her horse sharply and giving it a firm kick, riding off without another word. I chuckled to myself, put my shirt back on, and mounted my horse to continue toward the barn. Later, I learned there had been a miscommunication between Lily and her parents. They had expected her to return the following week, but much to their surprise, she had arrived just a couple of hours after I'd ridden out. She had spent the morning and early afternoon catching up with them before deciding to go for a ride, something she hadn't had much time for while in school, but still loved to do. She saddled up and rode out to her favorite spot, the waterfall and the pool beneath it. I guess after 2 months, I was old news, and Bill and Karen had simply forgotten to mention me. Just as I returned to the barn, I caught a glimpse of a redhead disappearing inside. I dismounted and led my horse in. Lily, apparently looking for her father, found her voice carrying clearly through the barn. "Who was that man up by the waterfall?" she demanded. Bill took a moment to think before replying. "That must have been Carter," he said. "He works here," she added, her tone sharp. "But last time I was here, you told me you couldn't afford to hire another hand." Bill remained calm. "Well, he's right. He does work here. As for what he gets paid, I don't think that's any of your business." I'd walked into the barn by then, and she had her back to me, so she didn't notice me immediately, but Bill had. He shot me a grin and said, "Is that true, Carter? If you think you're overpaid, I can fix that," I said with a smirk. Lily spun around, her piercing blue eyes locking onto me. I took off my hat with one hand and scratched the back of my head with the other. "Well, I'd hate to take advantage of you, Bill," I said with a smirk. "Just how much are you thinking of cutting my wages?" At that, Bill and I both cracked up laughing. Lily, however, wasn't amused. Her glare remained steady. "Sweetheart," Bill said, shaking his head, "just so you can stop buzzing about this, Carter stays in the cabin next to Sam's." Lily folded her arms. "And what else?" "That, and he gets to eat your mother's fine cooking," Bill added. Still not satisfied, Lily pressed on. "So you're telling me you won't pay him?" Bill's expression hardened slightly. "He has his reasons, and it's not my place to tell you." I decided to chime in. "Honestly, working just to have a chance to taste your mother's cooking is worth a lot. I don't think she'd appreciate you saying it's nothing." Lily shot me one last glare before storming out of the barn. Bill chuckled and shook his head. "She reminds me so much of her mother when she was young," he said. I never thought I'd say this, but I don't envy myself back then. That evening at supper, Lily joined us at the table, sitting next to Sam and directly across from me. When I entered the kitchen, she cast another sharp look my way. I waited until everyone had filled their plates before speaking in a pleasant tone. "I heard you just finished your doctorate in veterinary medicine," I said. "Yeah," was her one-word response, given without so much as a glance up. Undeterred, I continued, "Sam says there's only one other vet in the area, and he's over 30 miles away. I'm sure you're going to be a huge asset to the folks around here." She glanced up at my compliment, and for a moment, I thought I saw her eyes soften. "Yes, that would be Dr. Harrison," she replied. "He has more work than he can handle and is often needed in multiple places at once." Karen chimed in with a warm smile. "I agree with you, Carter. Our Lily will be a great asset to the community." For the rest of the meal, Lily spoke with her parents and Sam, who had been on the ranch since before she was born. She didn't address me directly, and I mostly stayed quiet. This was her homecoming, and I knew her family wanted to catch up on everything that had happened in her life while she was away. Once I finished eating, I excused myself and headed to my cabin. Checking my email, I found a message from Greg. He mentioned that he had spoken with a friend on the police force and casually inquired whether I was still considered a missing person. His friend confirmed that everything had been dropped after they received the email with the picture I had sent. As for Claire, it seemed Tyler had dumped her the moment he found out I had vanished with all the money. With no access to that money, Claire wasn't getting her hands on it anytime soon. She had lost the house we'd lived in and was now renting a small apartment in the city, working as a waitress. She also couldn't afford a lawyer to pursue me. I found it ironic. She had apparently married me for my money, and her boyfriend had only wanted her for the same reason. Back on the ranch, I was still replacing fence posts, though now only every third or fourth day. I had moved out of the hills and was working in an area where I could drive the pickup directly to my work site. It was much easier loading the posts into the truck rather than onto the mules. The morning after Lily returned home, I loaded up the pickup and drove to where I had left off. When my usual lunchtime rolled around, I walked back to the truck and realized I had forgotten my lunch. Karen always made sure we had food if we were working away from the main house, but I must have spaced out when it was time to grab mine. I considered driving back to get it, but decided skipping one meal wouldn't kill me. About half an hour later, as I finished setting a post and securing the wire, I heard a vehicle approaching. I turned and saw one of the ranch trucks pulling up. The truck came to a stop just as I completed my task, and to my surprise, Lily stepped out. She held a small paper bag, the kind Karen used for our lunches. "Mama said you forgot your lunch," she said, shoving the bag toward me. I took it from her. "Thank you, Lily. That was very kind of you." A quick glance inside revealed 2 sandwiches. As usual, I took one out and offered the other to her, but she shook her head. Shrugging, I walked over to the tailgate and sat down to eat. Lily remained standing a few feet away, arms crossed, watching me. I kept my focus on my meal, but after a moment, she finally spoke. "Why are you here?" I turned to look at her, deciding to have a little fun. Lowering my voice conspiratorially, I said, "You can't tell anyone, but I robbed a bank and stashed the money. I'm hiding out here until the heat dies down, then I'll go retrieve the cash." At first, her eyes widened in surprise before narrowing into a glare. "You're a real clown," she huffed, turning on her heel and heading back to her truck. I waited until she was halfway there before calling her name. She stopped, hesitated for a moment, then slowly turned back to face me. "I married a woman who never really loved me," I said. "She only cared about what I could provide for her. I ended up here because I needed to get away from everything I knew for a while." She studied me in silence, and I could tell she was trying to decide whether or not I was telling the truth. This time, after a moment, she gave a small nod and turned, walking back to her truck without another word. As I watched her drive away, I thought about what Bill had said, that Karen had been just like Lily when she was younger. He had claimed he'd tamed her, but I suspected it wasn't taming at all, it was love. And after less than 24 hours of knowing Lily, I couldn't imagine any man taming the fiery redhead. That night at supper felt much like the previous one. Lily chatted with her parents and Sam, but barely acknowledged me. I didn't take it personally. After all, she didn't know me, and we had nothing in common. We had nearly finished eating when a knock at the door interrupted the meal. Bill got up to answer it and returned with a man about my age, tall, dark-haired, and the type of guy women would call handsome. Lily's face lit up. "Tyler," she called excitedly, jumping from her seat and throwing her arms around him. It was clear they knew each other well. They quickly fell into conversation, catching up like old friends who hadn't seen each other in ages. A few minutes later, another knock sounded at the door. Bill opened it and returned with a second man, this one fair-haired, but just as good-looking. Lily greeted him just as warmly as the first, throwing her arms around him as well. I recalled Bill's words about having to fend off every man in town to win Karen. If Lily was anything like her mother, I imagined these two had quite the competition ahead of them. She was every bit as stunning as Karen had been in her youth, and it wasn't hard to see why she had suitors lined up. I excused myself from the table and headed back to my cabin, leaving them to their reunion. As I walked, I mentally wished the 2 men luck. If Lily turned out to be anything like her mother, whoever won her heart would be a lucky man. The next day, I took the pickup and rode the ranch, checking on the cattle. By the time I had finished my rounds, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the numbers didn't seem right. It was still early, so I returned to get Sam. Together, we did a whirlwind tour of the ranch, covering as much ground as possible. There were cattle scattered everywhere, but Sam agreed something wasn't adding up. It felt like we were missing a few herds. We decided to saddle up the next day and ride through the hilly areas. That night at supper, we discussed our plan with Bill, and he agreed. Unfortunately, it rained overnight, making it harder to find tracks. The next morning, we loaded our horses into a trailer, and Bill drove us to one end of the property. I rode about a third of the way up into the tree line, while Sam took a position another third higher. We then began making our way across the ranch, navigating the hills and weaving through the trees. It took most of the day to reach the far side, where we counted 5 stray herds. Bill met us as we emerged from the hills, and we loaded the horses back into the trailer before heading home. Over dinner, we discussed the situation and concluded that the only thing we could do for now was to stay extra vigilant. That evening, yet another suitor came calling for Lily. I overheard Karen mutter something about it being the third one that day. Word had clearly spread that she was back home, and men were coming out of the woodwork, all eager for her attention. For the next 4 days, Sam and I kept a close watch on the herd. Everything appeared to be normal, aside from the cattle that had initially gone missing. Meanwhile, Lily's admirers continued to show up. In the weeks since she'd been home, she hadn't spoken more than 2 words to me since the day she brought me my lunch. I didn't take it personally. After all, she didn't know me, and we hadn't had much of a chance to connect. On the 5th day after we first suspected cattle theft, I told Bill I wanted to ride the property line through the hills. We had already checked the fence lines along the pastures and hadn't found any signs of a break or forced crossing. Sam dropped me off on the west side of the ranch, where Bill's property bordered the Crestwood Ranch. About halfway to the southwest corner, I spotted 3 fresh sets of horse tracks. They led from the western side of the fence onto Bill's land. What struck me as odd was that the fence itself appeared intact. Dismounting, I examined the posts and quickly realized what had happened. Someone had loosened the staples on 5 fence posts, leaving them barely holding the wire in place. By removing the staples and lowering the wire, someone could easily cross over and then set everything back in place, making it look untouched. I remounted and followed the tracks carefully. As I neared the stream, I spotted 3 horses tied to a tree just above the waterfall. I was still about 30 yards away when I quickly dismounted, secured my horse to a tree, and pulled my rifle from its scabbard. When I reached the horses, I noticed boot prints leading downstream. Moving cautiously, I crept to the edge of the waterfall and peered over, then sucked in a sharp breath. Lily was in the pool, completely naked. The clear water left nothing to the imagination as she moved effortlessly through it. My gaze locked onto her, mesmerized. Damn, she had a cute bum. A sudden movement in the trees to her right jolted me back to reality. I scanned the area quickly and spotted 1 man lurking in the shadows to the right, while 2 more were closing in from the left. Without hesitation, I raised my rifle and fired the first shot, kicking up dirt near the feet of the man on the right. A quick second shot sent soil flying close to the other 2. Lily let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the trees. I stepped into full view and bellowed, "On your bellies now. I won't miss the next shot." "Not Lily, stay where you are." She didn't see the men, only me standing above her with a rifle in my hands. Frantically, she tried to cover herself. One of the men on the left flinched as if he was about to make a run for it. I squeezed the trigger again, blasting bark off the tree right next to him. That was enough to convince him. He dropped to the ground immediately. Lily followed the direction of my shot and finally saw the 2 men. She shrieked again. I started counting down. Before I could even say 1, the other 2 dropped to their stomachs, hands behind their heads. Now they obeyed instantly. Turning my attention back to Lily, I kept my voice firm. "Get out and get dressed." She hesitated, clearly shaken, and tried to protest. "Just do as I say," I said. My tone left no room for argument. Still trembling, she climbed out of the pool, like Venus rising from the sea. Even with her back to me, I couldn't tear my eyes away, her alabaster skin, the way the water glistened on her perfect curves. Those images were burned into my mind. She dressed quickly, slipping into her jeans and pulling on her shirt, but didn't bother with her boots. Swinging up onto her horse, she gave it a sharp kick and took off through the trees, disappearing from sight. Once she was gone, I turned my focus back to the 3 men. "All right, boys. What am I going to do with you?" I let a slow silence stretch between us before adding, "Guess I could just shoot you in the legs and watch you bleed out." That got an immediate reaction. All 3 started begging for mercy. Even if I let you go, Lily's father will ensure justice when I tell him about your vile intentions toward his daughter, I said, my voice cold and unwavering. Unless, of course, you have a more compelling confession for the sheriff. Something like cattle rustling. That might land you in jail, but at least it guarantees you a chance at life. The smallest of the three cracked first. Yeah, we did it, he blurted out. Crestwood said Buckman would secure his land. His companion snapped at him to shut up, but the man fired back. I ain't dying for no damn cows. Anticipating Lily's swift return and her father's inevitable involvement, I knew I needed to buy some time. Sure enough, about 45 minutes later, Bill and Sam came galloping into view. I signaled for them to slow down, and they raced up to meet me at the top of the rise. What the hell is going on? Bill demanded. It seems Crestwood's men decided to pay us an unwelcome visit, I replied. I tracked them from the fence line to here. Lily was swimming, and these three were sneaking up on her. I pressed the barrel of my rifle against the smaller man's neck. I believe this one has something to confess. The rustler whimpered before stammering. We did it. We took some of your cattle, but it was Crestwood who forced us. Bill tilted his hat back, grinning at Sam. You know, when my grandfather ran this ranch, they used to hang horse thieves and cattle rustlers. Justice was simpler back then. Too bad we have to be civilized these days. While Sam stood guard, Bill and I decided to march the rustlers back to the ranch with rifles in hand. We trailed behind them, Sam tethering their horses together and bringing up the rear. Upon reaching the buildings, we separated them into different stalls inside the barn, keeping the doors open so we could watch them without them seeing each other. Bill went inside to call the sheriff, while Sam and I stood watch. In less than 30 minutes, the sheriff arrived, tearing up the long driveway. Bill met him outside and briefed him on what had happened. Let's start with the little one, I suggested. He seems the most likely to talk. The sheriff agreed, and I hauled the rustler outside. At first, he hesitated, but when the sheriff casually suggested leaving them in Bill's hands and looking the other way, the man's eyes widened in terror. Suddenly, he was eager to talk. It didn't take long for the sheriff to extract the truth. Within an hour, a convoy of sheriff's vehicles rolled onto Crestwood's vast ranch. Despite its size, they quickly pinpointed the hidden location the rustler had described. Sure enough, nearly 100 stolen cattle, all bearing the Red Rock brand, were found. By nightfall, Crestwood and his men were in handcuffs. It was past 9 p.m. by the time we finally sat down for supper. Lily sat at the table but kept her gaze fixed on her plate. Bill, who hadn't had much chance to talk to her earlier, finally spoke. What were you doing out there? He asked, without looking up. Lily answered quietly, I was just taking a swim. I didn't think anyone would come spy on me. She shot me a sharp, accusing glare, but I met her gaze evenly. First off, Lily, I wasn't spying on you, I said. I was tracking their horse prints down to the stream. Secondly, consider what might have happened if I hadn't been there. I doubt those three were planning a picnic when they saw you swimming naked. Karen shuddered. Thank goodness you arrived when you did, Carter. I hate to think what might have happened. The conversation shifted, and we hurriedly finished our meal, mindful of the early start we had the next day. As I exited the kitchen and headed toward my cabin, Lily called out to me. I stopped and turned, only to be met with a sharp, sarcastic tone. So, did you enjoy the view today? Expecting gratitude was clearly too much. I simply replied, let's just say I'd be lying if I claimed it wasn't breathtaking. She huffed, spun on her heels, and marched back toward the house. I stood there shaking my head. No matter how much she tried to act indifferent, there was something about me that got under her skin. The following day, Bill headed into town to officially file charges against Crestwood. Returning the stolen cattle to their rightful place would take several days, as the prosecutor needed time to document everything. Meanwhile, Sam and I spent the day repainting some of the outbuildings. We had lunch in the kitchen, but Lily chose not to join us, something I found perfectly acceptable. Bill returned in the early afternoon, but waited until dinner to update us. Since this isn't a capital case, Crestwood and his men will be out on bail soon, he explained. I don't expect any more trouble, but we should stay vigilant. Then, with a mischievous grin, he glanced at his daughter. If you're planning another nude swim anytime soon, maybe you should take Carter along, for protection. Lily's face turned a deep shade of crimson. Dad, she sputtered before bolting from the table. Bill and Sam erupted in laughter, and even Karen couldn't suppress a giggle. I chuckled along with them. Once the laughter died down, Bill turned to me. I really appreciate what you did, Carter, he said. Crestwood could have put this ranch in serious financial trouble. You've more than earned your keep. We all shared another round of laughter before finishing dinner. 3 days later, Bill got word that he could finally retrieve his stolen cattle. We loaded 3 horses into a trailer and, accompanied by a sheriff's escort, drove to Crestwood's Flying D Ranch. Karen came along to drive the truck and trailer back. After we unloaded the horses, with Bill, Sam, and me on horseback, we started herding the cattle back toward Red Rock Ranch. As we neared home, I rode ahead and loosened part of the fence line, allowing the cattle to cross. Once every last animal was back where it belonged, we secured the fencing and returned to the main house, satisfied with the day's work. During this time, Lily had applied for her veterinary license. The approval process took about 45 days, so for now, she was limited to tending to animals on her father's ranch. I saw her around the property and, of course, at meal times. Despite her continued silent treatment, I made sure to catch her eye whenever I could, flashing a big grin and wiggling my eyebrows just enough to make her blush. 2 weeks after the waterfall incident, we ended up in the barn at the same time. Seizing the opportunity, I leaned against a stall and casually asked, "Enjoying any swims lately?" She stomped toward me, standing mere inches away, and shot me a glare. "Why are you such a—" I shrugged, smirking. "Why are you such a brat?" Her hand shot up, aiming for my face, but I reacted quickly, catching her wrist before she could land a slap. Undeterred, she tried with her left, but I caught that too. With both of her wrists pinned behind her back, I pulled her flush against me. Her breathing hitched, but she didn't struggle. She just stared at me, eyes locked on mine. I lowered my face slightly and murmured, "If you were mine, I'd put you over my knee and spank your butt." She tried to pull away. "You wouldn't dare." Suddenly, I let go, and she stumbled backward, landing unceremoniously on her butt. "It's not that I wouldn't dare," I said coolly. "I just got rid of one woman who didn't give a damn about me. I'm not wasting my time on another one." Traditionally, she was the one to storm off, but this time, it was my turn. I walked out of the barn, leaving her sitting on the ground. I didn't see her again until supper, and as expected, she didn't speak to me. However, the look she gave me was unreadable. Not that I ever claimed to understand women. My marriage to Claire had proven that well enough. The following day, I was in the barn tending to the stalls when Bill walked in. Since it was his day off, I figured he wanted to talk. I briefly wondered if Lily had told him about the previous day's encounter and if he was here to ask me to leave. I paused my work as he approached. "I heard you and Lily had a little showdown yesterday," he said. Well, that answered my question, she had told him. But there was a twinkle in his eye, and I didn't sense any hostility. "Yeah, I suppose you could say that," I admitted. "Probably my fault." Bill shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe not. I think her issue is she doesn't know what to make of you. At first, she thought you had some angle. Then you became the guy who saved her in the ranch. What she can't figure out is why you aren't chasing after her like the other young men around here." He leaned against a stall, watching me. Like her mother at her age, Lily's used to having boys wrapped around her little finger. She's had a few boyfriends, but none of them lasted. Truth be told, I don't think she really respected any of them. I just hope you don't let her drive you off. In my book, you're welcome here as long as you want. I nodded. Thanks, Bill. That means a lot. As for Lily, I'll lay off teasing her. Hopefully, we can just live and let live. Bill left the barn, and I resumed my work. His words stuck with me. If Lily truly wanted to understand me, acting civil and having an actual conversation would be far more effective than whatever she was trying to do. As for pursuing her like the others, that simply wasn't in the cards. She didn't join us for supper that night. No one brought it up, and I didn't ask. The following day, I stuck to my usual routine, up at 5 a.m. even on my day off. After breakfast, once Bill and Sam left for work, I gathered my laundry. Bill had invested in a large commercial washer and dryer, making it easy to do everything in a single load. Since the laundry room was next to the kitchen, I sat at the table eating and chatting with Karen while waiting. Then, Lily walked in, something unusual for this early in the morning, as she usually ate later. Karen asked about my plans for the day, and I mentioned that I was thinking of driving into town. She took the opportunity to ask if I could pick up a few things for her, and I assured her I didn't mind at all. Before I could say anything else, Lily spoke up. "I'll ride into town with you." I looked up in surprise. After yesterday, I hadn't expected her to talk to me, let alone ask to ride along. "Sure," I said. "I'd be happy to give you a lift." I told her I'd be leaving in about an hour and a half once my laundry was done and put away. She assured me she'd be ready. She finished preparing her breakfast and sat at the table, remaining quiet while Karen and I continued our conversation. Eventually, she stepped out of the house, looking stunning in a turquoise sundress that complemented her red hair. She clearly wanted to be noticed. I held the passenger door open for her and watched as she slid into the seat before closing it behind her. We set off, and for the first half of the trip, she sat quietly, watching the passing countryside. Then, out of nowhere, she spoke. "I thought you were going to kiss me yesterday." I glanced at her, but she was looking out the window, her expression hidden. I replied, "Well, that may not have been unpleasant, but I have a rule about not forcing unwanted affections on unreceptive women." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her head snap toward me. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her gaze lingering. We pulled into the general store and went inside. I needed a couple of new pairs of jeans and shirts, while Lily had a list of things her mother wanted. An hour later, we had everything loaded up, but I still needed to stop by the hardware store to pick up a few things for Bill. Since it was lunchtime and I was hungry, I suggested we grab a bite to eat. She agreed, and we headed to the same diner where I had first met Bill and Karen. We took a table across from each other, placed our orders, and sat in silence. I started to think I should have just gone straight to the hardware store and skipped lunch altogether. Then, the door swung open, and 3 guys walked in. I recognized 2 of them as the ones who had come sniffing around Lily before. They made a beeline for our table, with 2 sliding into the seats on either side of her, while the third stood behind me, ignoring me completely. They started chatting her up. I stood, gesturing for the third guy to take my seat, then moved to the next table over. When the waitress brought our food, I motioned her over and had her place my plate in front of me. I ate quickly, ignoring their conversation. Tossing some bills on the table to cover our meals, I stood up. "I'm heading to the hardware store. I can swing back later if you're not ready to go." Lily barely touched her food, but she suddenly pushed her plate back and stood up. "It was nice seeing you guys again, but we have to go," she said. They protested, one even offering her a ride home, but she declined and followed me out to the SUV. She stayed silent as we drove. The tension in the car was thick, and I could feel her frustration simmering. Finally, as we turned off the highway onto the mile-long driveway leading to the ranch, she spoke. "Why did you do that?" I glanced at her. "Do what?" "Move to the other table," she clarified. "Oh, that?" I replied. "Well, I figured you'd rather spend time with your friends. Besides, I didn't want to get caught in the middle of their competition for your attention." She scoffed. "You really are an a-hole." Wisely, I kept my mouth shut. No point in provoking her further, especially while I was driving. When we pulled up to the main house, she grabbed what she could. As soon as I opened the back of the SUV, I picked up the remaining bags and followed her inside, without saying a word to her mother. She dumped everything onto the kitchen table and stormed off to her room. Karen gave me a questioning look. I shrugged. "I guess I'm an a-hole," I said dryly. She chuckled and placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "I've never seen anyone get under Lily's skin the way you do." "Guess I was born to piss her off," I said. Karen shook her head. "I'm not so sure about that." Then she walked off, leaving me more confused than before. Deciding not to dwell on it, I returned to my cabin, put away my new clothes, and headed out, unwilling to spend the rest of the day cooped up. I saddled the horse and set off, eventually finding myself at the top of the waterfall. The weather was perfect, so I tied the horse to a nearby tree and sat at the edge, gazing down at the calm pool below. I must have been there for at least half an hour when Lily rode up below me. She dismounted, and not wanting to be accused of spying, especially if she was planning another swim, I picked up a stone and tossed it into the water, creating a loud splash. She looked around, searching for the source of the noise, and spotted me. Expecting her to leave, I was surprised when she instead mounted her horse and rode up to join me. She tied her horse beside mine and walked toward me. I stood, taking a few steps away from the edge, just in case she had any ideas about pushing me off. "You're an a-hole," she declared, stopping just inches from me. "And you're still a brat," I shot back. This time, I didn't wait for her slap. Before she could react, I wrapped an arm around her waist and kissed her. I released her quickly, turning for my horse, but she grabbed my arm, pulling me back. I barely had time to register my shock before she reached behind my neck and pulled me in for another kiss. This time, it deepened, passion overtaking us. One moment led to another, and soon our clothes vanished. We lost ourselves in each other completely, surrendering to the moment. As our breathing steadied, we lay together in silence, wrapped in each other's embrace. Eventually, we dressed, mounted our horses, and rode back down without a word. Lily stabled her horse and walked straight to the main house in a daze. I returned to my cabin, stepping into the shower. One thing was undeniable. I felt something much stronger for Lily than I had been willing to admit. I barely had time to dress before supper when I entered the kitchen. Bill, Karen, and Sam were already seated, but Lily was nowhere in sight. As we took our places, she walked in, and instead of sitting next to Sam as usual, she chose the chair beside me. Bill and Karen exchanged glances, but Lily only responded with a sweet, knowing smile. During dinner, she was uncharacteristically chatty, her mood light and animated. Though her parents were clearly curious about her sudden high spirits, they refrained from asking questions. After supper, she stayed behind to help her mother clean the kitchen while Sam and I returned to our cabins. Just as I was settling into bed, a soft knock echoed at my door. Clad only in my boxers, I opened it. Lily slipped inside without a word, finding her way into my arms. We shared a lingering kiss, and then she guided me toward the bed. As she shed her clothes, I pulled her close, and once again, we came together before drifting into sleep in each other's embrace. At 5 a.m., my alarm shattered the peaceful stillness. Groggy, I reached over to silence it, reluctant to move. Eventually, I managed to slip out of bed, turning on the bathroom light to get dressed. Before leaving, I pressed a gentle kiss to Lily's forehead and quietly slipped out of the cabin. At breakfast, I couldn't ignore the knowing looks Bill and Karen kept casting my way. I wondered if they were aware of where their daughter had spent the night. After the meal, I loaded the pickup and set out for another long day of setting fence posts. Working alone on the ranch gave me plenty of time to think, and my thoughts inevitably drifted to everything that had happened. It was hard to believe that only 3 months had passed since I had left Claire. It felt like a lifetime ago. I reflected on how much Bill, Karen, and Sam had come to mean to me, how they had given me a place here. And then, of course, there was Lily. I thought about her, about the moments we had shared, and wondered if I could ever find the kind of love her parents had. When lunchtime arrived, I realized once again I had forgotten to bring a meal. Just as the thought crossed my mind, I heard the roar of an approaching pickup. Moments later, Lily jumped out, running toward me with a bag in hand. The moment she reached me, she threw her arms around me, pulling me into a passionate kiss before handing me the bag. Ignoring the meal for now, I wrapped her in my arms again, returning the kiss with equal intensity. I didn't set as many fence posts that day, but I certainly planted my stake in her a few times. Between our moments of passion, we also found time to talk. I opened up about my past, sharing the details of my former life and how Claire had betrayed me. The only way I'll leave is if you tell me to go, I reassured her. She eventually rode back home, and I finished my day's work. After showering and changing, I headed to the main house for supper. Lily was already there, once again choosing the seat next to mine. Midway through the meal, a knock sounded at the front door. Bill answered it and returned with a familiar face, the same guy who had first come calling on Lily. He took a seat, his eyes darting to Lily. "I was wondering if you'd like to go for a drive," he asked. Out here, where entertainment options were limited, going for a drive was just another way of asking someone on a date. Lily didn't hesitate. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't think my boyfriend would like it." Then, as if to drive the point home, she leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. The poor guy flushed, stammered out some excuse, and made a hasty exit. Just like that, our relationship was out in the open. I glanced at Bill and Karen, catching the approving smiles they exchanged. Karen, in particular, looked downright pleased with that moment. Lily and I were officially a couple. In the days that followed, the steady stream of local men calling on Lily vanished. Word had clearly gotten around that she was no longer available. Meanwhile, I found a way to help her with her long-term plans. She had been trying to secure a loan from the bank to purchase the necessary equipment for her veterinary business. The bank, however, was hesitant to offer an unsecured loan, and the only viable option was for her father to put the ranch up as collateral, something she was reluctant to ask of him. "Give me a couple of days," I told her. "I might have a solution." I contacted my offshore bank and set up an account under the name of a fictitious loan company. Then, I had Lily fill out a loan application on my computer, routing it directly to my email. After waiting a few days, I sent her a formal approval notice, stating that the funds would be wired to her account. She was ecstatic but raised an eyebrow at the incredibly low 2% annual interest rate. Why so low? She asked. They're a nonprofit philanthropic group, I explained. They offer loans to people they believe will make a positive impact on their community. The truth was, I could have simply given her the money outright, but I knew she was too proud to accept it as a gift. Having earned her veterinary degree through sheer determination and hard work, she was determined to build her career on her own terms. By the time her license was approved, she had purchased a fully equipped mobile vet van, complete with all the necessary medical instruments. Once word spread that she was officially in business, calls started pouring in from local ranchers. Many nights, Lily spent with me in my cabin. Bill and Karen were well aware, but they never voiced any objections. At 27, Lily was more than capable of making her own decisions. Meanwhile, Justice caught up with Crestwood and his crew. Their trial took 3 months, but the outcome was clear-cut. The smallest member of the group cooperated with the prosecution and received 2 years of probation, avoiding prison time. The 5 ranch hands who had worked under Crestwood each received 5-year sentences. As for Crestwood himself, being the mastermind behind the rustling operation earned him the maximum sentence, 10 years in prison and a $50,000 fine. When Crestwood was taken to prison, I launched an investigation into his background and ranch. I discovered that he was single, had no family in the area, and with all his ranch hands incarcerated, there was no one left to manage his land. This led me to develop a new plan. However, before setting it in motion, I needed to take care of unfinished business, finalizing my divorce. The thought of Claire walking away with half my money was something I couldn't accept. To prevent that, I turned to my trusted friend Greg for assistance. Instead of sending an email, I called him directly and asked him to approach Claire on my behalf. I wanted him to relay a simple proposal. I was willing to offer her $50,000 in exchange for a clean, uncontested divorce. If she refused, she'd never hear from me again and wouldn't receive a dime. At first, Claire played innocent, demanding to know why I had left and why I wouldn't return. The act didn't last long. Greg shut it down by revealing that I knew about her affair with Tyler and her plan to divorce me. With her deception exposed and still struggling financially as a waitress, she quickly accepted my offer. To finalize everything, I needed to return to Texas and hire a lawyer to draw up the divorce papers. When I told Lily about my trip, she wasn't thrilled, but I explained that I needed to close this chapter of my life once and for all and assured her that I would return. Initially, I planned to leave my SUV at long-term parking at the airport, but Lily insisted on driving me there herself and being there when I returned. Leaving behind my vehicle and most of my belongings, aside from a single suitcase, seemed to ease her concerns. I flew out on a Sunday, and Greg picked me up at the airport. Staying with him and his family, I made sure to call Lily every night. By Friday, everything was settled. Greg took Claire to my lawyer's office, where she signed the papers for our agreement. She received an immediate check for $10,000, with the remaining $40,000 to be paid within 60 days of the divorce's finalization. I never had to see her face again. It wasn't until then that I remembered my personal belongings, things I had in storage, including keepsakes, heirlooms from my parents, yearbooks, and other sentimental items. Not wanting to make a separate trip later, I rented a moving van and packed everything up. When I told Lily I wasn't flying back, but instead driving home with everything important to me, her excitement grew. She saw it as a sign of my commitment. 3 days of relentless driving later, I pulled into Red Rock Ranch on Tuesday evening. Everyone greeted me warmly, but Lily's welcome was particularly enthusiastic, one that lasted well into the early hours of the morning. With the first part of my plan complete, I was ready to move forward with the next step. This meant making several trips to the prison where Crestwood was serving his sentence. My goal was to convince him to sell me his ranch. At first, he was resistant, unwilling to let go of his land, but I persisted, laying out the harsh reality. He would be in prison for at least 7 years with no chance of parole for good behavior anytime soon. In his absence, the ranch would deteriorate, the house and buildings falling into disrepair. Without proper care through the winter, his cattle could die. And even if he did manage to get out early, would the community even accept him back after what he had done? Faced with the inevitable ruin of everything he had built, Crestwood eventually agreed. Selling the ranch would at least give him something to start over with when he was finally released. The next step was securing financing. I moved my money back into the country, confident that Claire wouldn't risk jeopardizing her $40,000 by making any rash moves. I negotiated a purchase price of $5 million with Crestwood, below the property's true value, which made securing financing relatively easy. I put down a $500,000 down payment and financed the remaining amount, taking a month to finalize everything. I kept my activities a secret from everyone except Lily and Bill, explaining only that I had personal business related to my assets that needed attention. Though it only took up 1 or 2 days of my time each week, I remained focused. I set up a corporation and registered the land under its name. As summer ended and fall set in, I hired a crew to harvest the hay on the property and brought on 4 ranch hands to live on-site and manage operations. The most experienced among them was appointed temporary foreman. I made it clear that, for now, I would be an absentee owner, despite being close by, but assured him that he could always reach me by phone. I also planned to visit the ranch frequently. The final step of my plan was remodeling the main house, a 2-story, 5-bedroom structure that needed modernization. Despite Lily's frustration over my secrecy, our relationship continued to flourish. My love for her grew stronger each day, and I could sense she felt the same. Meanwhile, her veterinary business thrived, keeping her busy on the road, but she remained happy and fulfilled. There were moments when I nearly spilled the truth about what I was doing. After one of my visits to check on the renovations, Lily confronted me. "What the hell is going on, Carter? Are you seeing someone else?" "God, no," I swore. "I promise there's no one else. I just have some things I need to take care of. Please believe me. I'll tell you everything soon. I just need you to trust me." She searched my face, looking for any sign of deception. Finally, she sighed. "Okay, Carter, I do trust you, but you'd better tell me what's going on soon, or I'm going to kick your butt." I pulled her in and kissed her with all the love I had. By the time spring arrived and calving season began, the renovations were complete. It was time to execute the final part of my plan. One afternoon, I asked Lily to go for a drive. As we cruised down the road, I told her, "I've been thinking it's time for me to leave Red Rock Ranch." Her eyes immediately welled with tears. "But you promised you wouldn't leave," she whispered. I had timed it perfectly. Just as she spoke, we arrived at the entrance to what had once been Crestwood's Flying D Ranch. I turned in, driving down the private road. "I wasn't really planning on going far," I said. She looked around, clearly confused, as if she hadn't fully registered my words. Then she asked, "Why are we on Crestwood's land?" I didn't answer right away, waiting until we pulled up to the newly renovated main house. I climbed out, walked around to open her door, and took her hand. "Come on," I said. "I want to show you something." As I led her to the front door, she hesitated. "Carter, what the hell are we doing? We could get in trouble for this." "Relax," I said with a grin. "Crestwood doesn't own this ranch anymore." "Then what are we doing here?" she asked, still confused. I smiled. "It's not the Flying D anymore. It's Red Rock Ranch. And I'm the owner now." She stared at me in disbelief. "You own this ranch?" she asked, her voice filled with surprise. I nodded, grinning. With a scream of pure joy, she shouted, "Yes." I pulled out the engagement ring and held it up. As soon as she saw it, her face scrunched up with emotion, her eyes brimming with tears. For a brief moment, I worried I had miscalculated, but then she launched herself at me, knocking me onto my back and covering my face in kisses, laughing through happy tears. She held out her hand, wiggling her fingers impatiently. I slid the ring onto her finger, and she gasped, admiring it. Suddenly, she darted off, running from room to room, examining every inch of the house with fresh eyes. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her excitement unfold. Finally, she rushed back into my arms. "It's beautiful, Carter." "I love it," she said, her voice full of enthusiasm. Smiling, I led her across the room to 2 doors at the end of the hallway. "There are 2 offices, one for me and one for you to run your business from," I said. That earned me another long, passionate kiss. I took her into the office with the desk and pulled out a large piece of paper. It was a sketch of the new property gate with bold letters over the top that read, Red Rock Ranch. She looked at it, puzzled. "Red Rock?" she asked. "It stands for Carter and Lily Ranch," I explained. Tears welled up in her eyes again. Before I could say anything else, she was already tugging at my clothes. I didn't hesitate to return the favor. I lifted her onto the desk, and right then and there, we christened the office with our love. In the days that followed, we made love in every single room of our new home. Once we had recovered and dressed, I told her it was time to go share the news with her parents. She was so ecstatic that I swore she floated all the way to the truck. We arrived at Red Rock Ranch just after 6 p.m. Bill, Karen, and Sam were already in the kitchen preparing for supper. Lily burst through the door, lifted her left hand high, and squealed, "We're getting married." Karen immediately jumped up, pulling her daughter into a tight hug, while Bill and Sam shook my hand and clapped me on the back in congratulations. Then it was my turn to get a warm embrace from my soon-to-be mother-in-law, while Lily hugged her father and Sam. Once the excitement settled and everyone sat down to eat, Lily, ever the mischief maker, waited until everyone was mid-bite before casually dropping, "Of course, this means we'll be moving." Bill, Karen, and Sam all exclaimed in unison, "What?" Lily grinned and looked at me. "Go ahead, tell them." I set my fork down and turned to Bill. "You know how Crestwood wanted to merge his ranch with yours?" I said. "I was thinking that might not be such a bad idea." Bill shot up from his chair, his face darkening. "There is no way in hell the Flying D is getting my ranch," he declared. I laughed. "Relax, Bill. It's not the Flying D anymore. It's Red Rock Ranch, and the new owners are sitting at your table right now." He blinked, trying to process what I had just said. "What are you talking about?" "I bought out Crestwood," I explained. "The ranch belongs to Lily and me now." Before Bill could say another word, Karen clapped her hands. "Red Rock, Carter, and Lily," she exclaimed, immediately catching on. I nodded, grinning. "Exactly." Bill looked me square in the eye. "I was thinking, if we combined our ranches, we could run them together, split the profits 50-50ths. I met his gaze. "Bill, you've been doing this your whole life. I need your help. I want us to be equal partners. You'll handle the operations, and whatever you say goes. Besides, this is part of Lily's ranch too. It stays in the family." Bill sat back, glancing at Karen. She gave a small nod of approval. With a sigh, he reached across the table, extending his hand. I shook it firmly. "Damn it, Carter," he said, shaking his head. "This is going to take some getting used to, but I accept your offer." I grinned. "That means we'll need more hands to manage everything. And Sam is officially the head foreman." "Oh, and I guess I'll finally have to pull out all those fence posts I worked so hard to set on that side of the property," I added. Laughter erupted around the table, and the rest of the night turned into a loud, joyous celebration. Lily spent the night in my cabin, and by the time morning came, she had thoroughly worn me out. We ended up running late for breakfast, but everyone was still in the kitchen when we arrived. They had been waiting for us so we could eat together before heading over to Red Rock Ranch for Lily to show off our new home. Everyone was impressed. I caught Karen eyeing the newly remodeled kitchen with a hint of jealousy, though she smiled warmly. Over the next month, she and Lily worked tirelessly to furnish the house, and by our wedding night, it was finally ready to be our home. We were married at Red Rock Ranch, surrounded by friends, family, and ranchers from miles around who had come to celebrate with us. Bill and his family were well respected, and as his son-in-law and the new owner of Red Rock, I was welcomed into their world. That night, Lily and I finally made it to bed, where we stayed wrapped up in each other well into the next day. In fact, if it had been up to us, we might have never left. But on the third day of our marriage, I surprised my new bride with a honeymoon in Fiji. Our first roundup that year was a success, and we sent a large number of cattle to market, bringing in a solid profit. A good portion of it went toward paying off the ranch loan. But with Lily's thriving veterinary business, we were living comfortably. We even built a beautiful new house for Sam, who had recently started seeing a girl from town. If things kept going the way they were, we might be celebrating another wedding soon. Another year had passed, and today my incredible wife gave me the most amazing news. She's pregnant. We're going to have a baby. One last thought before I go. I know some people might say I should have learned my lesson the first time and made Lily sign a prenuptial agreement. But if you think that, then you don't truly know Lily. She isn't Claire. She works hard, runs her business, and takes care of our home with love and dedication. She is her mother's daughter, strong and loyal, and she shares her love with me every single day, with me and only me. Every time I look into her blue Irish eyes, I see it. The love that's real, the love that lasts. Thanks for watching. Do you think the protagonist made the right choice in moving on? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I came across information suggesting that when people seek a partner, they naturally evaluate one another based on specific characteristics. Key factors include education, age, looks, social standing, and financial status. Additionally, elements such as having kids from a prior relationship, being generous, possessing a sense of humor, intelligence, and lifestyle choices like drinking or vegetarianism are also significant. One general assumption is that a guy making $75,000 a year might be okay as a friend with benefits for a woman making $20,000, but isn't husband material. Despite what you see in Hollywood movies, the wealthy don't marry the hired help, they marry within their own social class. We all know roughly our level of desirability. A man probably won't expect a woman he sees as far above his level to do more than hook up with him. We subconsciously think that somewhere along the path of courtship and marriage, they will decide it was a mistake and that they can do better. Whether this is true or not, it got me thinking that my wife and I are well matched. We married in our late 30s, a bit later than our folks did, and now, after 6 years, we are starting to talk about having a family. Maybe this fall. We're both decent-looking, clever people from Connecticut working-class families. My family made more money than hers. My dad is a successful contractor from Westbridge, but my wife's family had more status. She was an oops baby, born to a mother at the end of her childbearing years, married to an older man. Her dad was president of a small bank in Greendale. Those were the days when bankers made a decent living but didn't earn a lot of money. Her dad wore a suit every day, and everyone in town knew they might need to go to him for a loan. He controlled money and people's access to it, and because of that, he had status. As adults, we each graduated from college, her from a prestigious private college with no scholarship aid. Her mother worked for years to pay the tuition. I graduated from the local state college, which I paid for with a little help from my dad. Sophia majored in art history with a minor in political science, an interesting field, but tough to earn enough money to raise a family on. On the other hand, I had the brains to get into a private school, and Dad had the money and urged me to do so. Observing my family, I realized that success in life at our level was more about initiative and brains than education. I learned the basics of running a business and how to think, speak, and write in more or less that order. The local state college suited me fine, especially as I could attend courses at Yale and Wesleyan colleges more or less at will. I majored in history with a minor in business and took overloads every semester. After 2 years, I switched to engineering. I loved learning, reveling in poetry, literature, and history for my soul, while balancing them with economics and engineering courses for the practical part of my mind. I ignored students focused on the party life and made several fast friends among the serious students. During school, I worked for my dad during summers and learned the hard work and sweat side of the contracting business. After graduation, I learned the business side. I discovered that while I was good at management, I didn't enjoy it. I liked old historic buildings, the craftsmen on site, the thrill of discovery as you removed layers of renovation, and the sense of accomplishment when restoring them to their former glory. You honor architects and craftsmen, dead 50 years or more, by giving new life to their work. I also liked having an active hand in the work. I met an old man who specialized in decorative plaster work and was seduced by the craft and his way of working. I spent 3 years as his apprentice and then developed a nice business as a small firm specializing in restoration plaster. This included everything from the structural support of plasterwork to decorative painting, gilding, and other ornamental work. I knew I wouldn't get rich, but it would provide a good living. At 35 years of age, I carry on my payroll my former master Robert, his apprentice, a secretary and office manager, and 1 laborer. I hire subcontractors and a host of the best restoration artists and professionals in the business as needed. As a side note, I am nearly finished writing a book on restoring decorative plasterwork with Robert as my co-author. Oddly enough, while Sophia went to school 7 miles away from my school with 3 years of overlap, I never met her during those years. 5 years after I graduated, I met her in a bar when we were both back visiting our respective folks. Her father had died, and her mom moved to Clearwater. Sophia had been married and divorced in the interim. She refused to say much about it other than her husband became abusive, which is all one has to say. In getting to know her, we talked about our common experience in and around Yorkport. She was a bit of a party girl in college, no thought to earning a living, no overloads, and no challenging classes. Having said this, you would make a mistake to assume she had a second-class mind. She was smart but lazy, never learning the pleasure of working on a difficult intellectual puzzle. I now realize this was the curriculum of choice for many who imagine themselves in the upper class. Not much work, lots of fun, and a prestigious diploma. The real world comes as a surprise to people like that. She was surprised and a bit jealous to find I had taken courses from some of the same professors she did, although she tended to take introductory courses while I talked my way into more focused upper-level ones. It also irked her that I spent considerable time at these professors' homes, eating at their tables, meeting their spouses, and discussing art, science, and life well into the night. Some of them regularly assist me now when I run into issues of conservation and don't know exactly what I am seeing emerge from under the paint I have to remove or what I have in front of me. The economic, upbringing, educational, and regional connections created a bond, but I thought it was our intellect that deepened our relationship into love and finally marriage. The decision about where we would live was easy. I mentioned at work that Sophia was living in Bridgetown, and Robert announced that as he had family in Bridgetown, we all might as well move there. It was closer to bigger jobs, and property costs weren't as high, so we did. When I bought our house, the neighborhood was somewhat undesirable. Ours is a lovely Victorian Romanesque-style house faced with cut serpentine stone, a soft stone found locally with a greenish cast. The inside was complete with all of the original stained glass windows and custom woodwork. I replastered half of the house, copying the original moldings and plasterwork decoration. You may have seen it, as it's been written up in several magazines lately. The neighborhood's gentrification has been accelerating, which is good for our investment. The house is worth 3 or 4 times what we have in it now. However, we are surrounded by folks who earn, or at least make, a lot more money than us. Most of my work is for the wealthy, institutions, or the government, so my wife and I have to be socially active. She's got a part-time job with the local Democratic Party, and our social life has changed from a dinner and movie to a dinner and a play or the symphony. I've had to buy a black suit and a couple of 150 ties. Now I cannot reliably pronounce the names of French Impressionist painters with the proper accent, but one of the growing differences between us is that wifey can and looks down on those who cannot. I am always clean and well-dressed but prefer an understated look. Actually, I admire the way the relatively few wealthy ones who come from old money dress superb quality, but never the brand names added onto cheaply made clothing from China, no logos showing. My casual clothes are worn but not worn out. Our neighbors are similar to most people who are doing well for themselves, in my opinion. They are overgroomed, diet to the point of becoming scrawny, and show their class insecurity by wearing outrageously expensive designer clothing with the labels on the outside so they can impress their peers. Janet, our neighbor's wife, is very proud of a hugely expensive watch that looks like a Chihuahua's Collarno taste. Despite my enjoyment of physical work, my business has shifted from me doing it myself to me undertaking the business end of restoration. I still work with my hands and body as much as possible. I figured out that if my back goes out, I can't work, so I work out 3 times a week to ensure that I stay flexible and my muscle tone is good enough to keep me from getting hurt. However, I also like to eat, and while weightlifting maintains muscle mass, it doesn't do much about calories. My weight has been edging up a bit, and my business down a bit, thanks to the recession. Last November, I noticed that shirts marked large didn't fit so well when I sat down. While not obese, I do have a belly that I have to admit is larger than is convenient. By contrast, wifey has, as they used to say, kept her shape. It also occurred to me that my very desirable wife is surrounded by high-earning, good-looking, trim males, and I don't look too good by comparison. Further, I rationalized that you do have to call a stop to waistline creep somewhere, or you risk becoming a circus attraction. So when my daughter dumped her 130-pound 2-year-old mutt named Buddy on US Buddy for short, I used him to make a change in my life. Since I work out of our home much of the time, I got the job of primary caregiver to the dog, taking him for walks while my Sophia does the brushing and the occasional bath. After a bit, she decided to rename the dog, and wifey settled on Max. I wondered if she might have been thinking of Cerberus, the big 3-headed dog guarding the gates of Hades. She sometimes uses one word when she means another, but the words were a bit too different for that. Or maybe she liked the nickname Max and didn't realize it was short for Spartan. I didn't much care for the name, but what the hell, Max it was except when I had to holler it on the street. Then I shortened it to Spark. The dog doesn't seem to mind being called different names. One of the jobs of dog ownership is walking the dog, which should certainly be more than short defecatory rambles. Max is a remarkably good-looking fellow. People stop us to admire him. Well, formerly a he, there are a few essential bits missing now. Max isn't satisfied with a quick stroll around the block unless the weather is rotten. He likes to get a good long walk. I started walking the dog several miles a day and discovered I really like to walk. In no time, I had lined up my day's phone calls, and we did a walk and call. We would spend an hour walking 3 miles every morning while I got my calls in. From there, it was a short hop to jogging half a mile, walking half a mile, jogging half a mile, so we were covering 4 miles in an hour. I pushed it to 5 miles an hour, but the dog was struggling, so we settled on 4 miles an hour. At the same time, I shifted my diet as well, reducing the helpings of meat and eating more vegetables and salad. No prepared salad dressing, home dressings made with balsamic vinegar, a bit of olive oil and cheese. I used to joke that you couldn't neglect a belly like mine. You had to feed it 3 times a day, or it would shrivel up to nothing. Although it began to shrivel, I really didn't feel I was culinarily deprived just eating right. I had dropped from 240 to 210 pounds before wifey remarked, "Have you lost weight or something? Those pants are a bit too big." Nah, I probably was never as fat as you remember me to be. Seriously, these pants were always a little big. We support 2 of the local charity resale shops, and since I wear kind of generic men's clothes, it was easy to donate my big chinos and jeans and buy smaller ones that fit. All of the clothes are slightly worn, and all look pretty much the same as the clothes I've always worn. Wifey has a few quirks, one that she inherited from her mother, who was an out-and-out hippie flower child who married a banker. Go figure. Neither woman liked perfume or scented deodorants and didn't use anything but clear nail polish. Her natural smell is quite pleasant, but you have to have your nose close to notice it. It was remarkable then, when she came home one Wednesday with some perfume on, thinking she was perhaps advertising her availability for loving. I gave her a hug, followed by a nuzzle and kiss in expectation. But no, apparently tonight was not the night. She went upstairs to shower before supper, which was another unusual event. It may have been the rejection of amorous intent that got me to thinking it had been a while since we made love, perhaps a couple of weeks, and God knows when the last time was that she initiated lovemaking. I had brought this issue up before about me always asking for loving and never her. I had even suggested marriage counseling. She claimed that she loved me very much, but at this time in her life, she had a weak libido, and that was that. So did the perfume come from a sample at a department store? I looked in her purse but found nothing there. At supper, nothing was out of place. The conversation was normal, and there was casual affection. I was suspicious and, yes, I felt stupid going through the hamper looking for stains on her underwear. I didn't really expect any and saw none. Over the next week, I checked our phone records and computer but saw nothing out of the ordinary. On subsequent Tuesdays, I smelled the same perfume on her but never found the bottle. I didn't ask wifey, as I figured I would get a bogus answer, and yet I couldn't find anything obvious. One evening, she did mention a job at the art museum she was going to apply for. I mentioned, "I know Tom Hoving, the business manager over there, quite well. What's the job? Do you want to meet him?" The response was cold water. "No, Alex, I don't want your friends to try to get me a job. I want to do it on my own." "Well, be assured that they won't give you a job no matter who recommends you. I can get you the interview with the right person. It's up to you from there, but please yourself." What the hell, I thought. Go for it, girl. Still, I thought nothing untoward about her changing jobs. So what can you do? Look for changes in behavior and hope they mean nothing. My weight got down to 190 during all of this, and my leg muscles had bulked up a bit. Frankly, I looked good and felt good. I slept well. My pecker stood at attention every morning when I woke up. Even wifey noticed and complimented me on my appearance, not that it resulted in anything like a surge in our lovemaking. But I began to notice other women now went a bit out of their way to chat with me. I must admit this latter bit generally occurred when I was walking the dog. Dogs do make people more accessible to chat, but the chats were increasingly broken off by me, or the dog, as he is not interested in long talks when he wants to be walking. The dog walks soon got boring, starting as they did from the house every day. So first as a treat and later as a habit, the dog and I began taking a taxi to other areas around about 4 miles from our house. would get dropped off out there, and then walk home. One Monday, as is my custom, I was up before Sophia, made coffee for myself and tea for her. I was reading the paper when she came down for breakfast, fruit plate on the table, English muffins by the toaster. "Why don't you look nice? What's with the shoes? You need to wipe the dust off of them. You've been wearing sandals for the last month or more." "Well, I thought they would look nice with this dress. Isn't that a summer sundress? I'd have thought sandals more in keeping with the season." "Alex, no one asks you for fashion advice, do they? There's a reason for that. I have a full day in the office, but I'll be home at the usual time. What's on your schedule today?" "I have to see Brian in construction. They got the contract to restore the Imperial Theater, and there's so much decorative work that if I get the job, I'm going to have to hire more help. Looking it over could take all day. Other than that, they'll be here when you get home. The site is a bit of a walk from our place, so the dog and I took a cab." The theater is a huge auditorium built in 1940. It's suitable for movies or live acts with 1,800 seats and was saved by a local college last year from the wrecking ball. It was one of the driving forces in the rehabbing of what could be a lovely neighborhood. However, it was a pain in my butt. Brian didn't have a copy of the specification and wasn't sure what I should include in my bid other than the plaster work. I explained that, of course, he could pay us to put up scaffolding, do the plaster work, and then take it down. Then he could pay the painters and gilders to put the scaffolding back up and take it down again. But where was the savings in that? Plus, we would know what plaster needed weeks to dry and what could be done right away. Letting me do it all would save at least a couple of months in completing the job. I think I sold him on expanding my scope. Brian normally does new work, but times are tough. He took this job and was a bit out of his element. I spent a lot of time taking pictures and crawling all over the place, getting some idea of the extent of the damage. The dog did easy time and snoozed peacefully for about 3 hours. I was about done by 11:30 and glad I was to be out in the air again. Max and I set out in the general direction of home, but I was hungry and wanted to check out a block of restaurants I had read about in the Sunday paper. By 12:30, we had walked about 2 miles and were traversing the restaurants, each with sidewalk eating out front. Both the dog and I were interested in the smells of food. I was surveying the lot to figure out what appealed to me. At the next stop, the last restaurant, I spotted my wife at an outside table close to the building. She was clearly holding hands with a well-dressed older man. She probably would have noticed me if she wasn't so focused with happy intent on what her dinner companion was saying. Of course, she didn't expect me to be there, and the dog was hidden by the other tables and a row of little potted bushes and such, so he hadn't given us away. If there had been any doubt as to it being her, the dog picked his nose up and gave a gentle woof, recognizing her scent. I put him in the heel position lest he lunged into the restaurant and walked past them. My mind was racing with thoughts ranging from denial to homicidal rage. I continued around the block while my head cleared until I came to the point where they were in view again. I was sure I didn't recognize the guy. He was clearly older than her by 20 years and had the look of money about him. By now, the table had been cleared and coffee served. I had stalled as long as I could. I had to make a decision: attack, flee, or hide and follow them. What really decided it was that wifey's back was to me, so I could approach unrecognized. I put the dog in the heel position and walked up to them, keeping my eyes on the folks at the table next to them, so Studley wouldn't connect my approach with them. As I closed in, I saw wifey had her shoe off and was rubbing his leg with her foot, which sported red nail polish. As I came abreast of the table, I picked up an empty chair and sat down at their table, clearly startling the two of them. "Sophia, I was just walking by and saw you here. Who's the new man?" She visibly jumped and yanked her hand out of his with a look of panic in her eyes, while the dog was pestering her with his exuberant doggy greeting. I nudged her shoe out of reach and stuck out my hand to Studley. "Hi, I'm Daniel Walters. The habits of courtesy carry us through all embarrassment. Charles Thompson." And with no prompting, I help out at the party office with Sophia. "Charles, this is my husband Daniel and our dog Max. What are you doing here?" "Gee, I asked you first. What are you two doing here? You tell me." Her foot with scarlet red painted toenails was scrambling around under the table, trying to find her shoe. "Oh, just having lunch. And your plans for afterward?" "We're going back to work, of course." "Oh, of course. Well, good. That relieves my mind. When I saw you holding hands and you playing footsie under the table with your red toes, I thought that this might be a local Democratic sequel to Bill and Monica. You're not a cigar smoker, are you, Charles? I heard a guffaw from the table behind me, but Studley smirked and shook his head. Afraid not. Planning to put something else in then, I suppose? Well, you folks get along with your afternoon. It's a long cab ride back to your office from here, Sophia. I assume you'll be home at the regular time. They'll have supper ready and a dessert, so please don't bother bringing home a cream pie. I don't think she knew what a cream pie is because she looked befuddled. The guys behind me did another chuckle, and a slightly embarrassed grin came from Studley. Daniel, I resent your insinuations. This is nothing more than a lunch. I stood up, returned the chair to the table where I found it, and glanced directly at the two guys behind me who had been hanging on every word. So I asked them, well, jury of two, since you are unknown to the principals here gathered, I ask you, can this woman be believed? Hell no, buddy. They were talking about how to communicate with each other when they're away from the office without you finding out. Charles, as she calls him, arrived with 2 throwaway cell phones and gave her one. It's in her purse. They were planning to go to his house this afternoon. Sorry, dear. The jury has voted for conviction. The judge will now retire and consider the sentence. By the way, keep the phone, Sophia. You may need it soon. Come, Max, let's go. To the guys, she named the dog. They laughed. Figures. When I resumed my walk, I felt bad awful. Actually, but I thought I had made the right decision. I felt bad because I really loved Sophia, but I rather thought she was now out of my life. In fact, I had lost my appetite for both her and for lunch. You can only lose someone's trust once. After that, you may say, of course I trust you, but it's not like before. I wondered who exactly Charles was to her. The obvious options were buddies, a male shoulder to cry on during the divorce she was planning, or the long-awaited love of her life and her new husband. I called my younger sister, who was also self-employed and a fact-checker for assorted media. In essence, if a news source claims so-and-so divorced in 1980, my sister checks the fact. She's very good at digging information out of the internet. Hey sis, you online at the moment? Yes, why? You and Max get lost again? Nope. Big secret, though it's completely legal but very confidential. You can't tell anyone in the family about what I need you to do. You're kidding. Nope. Go online and look up Charles Thompson. He's about 60 years old and lives in Bridgetown. I want to know all the dirt about him: credit rating, marriage, money, etc. If you have to pay to get into databases, they'll pay you back. Call me on my cell phone when you get some good stuff. The deadline is 5 p.m. I can do it, Daniel, but why the secrecy? What's happening? I think Sophia may be getting interested in him. I need your help now. You got it. Off the top of my head, I recall Thompson is from old money but has none himself, bit of a rotter. Married to Elizabeth Granger Davis, who has loads of bucks and is a society maven. Charles is a man about town who does nothing but is accepted socially because of his wife of many years. Don't loan him money and regard anything he says with suspicion. That's the nutshell biography. They'll get some specifics by 5 p.m. I especially wanted to know how much money he has. How the hell do you know all that off the top of your head? Well, like I say, he gets around and is in the papers quite a bit. That, and I did the fact checks on a book about his father a few years ago. I'm drawing a blank on the author's name, but it felt like I wrote half of the book. Great. Look forward to hearing from you later. And thank you. Well, knowing the enemy is the key to winning the battle. As I was walking by anyway, I rummaged in the 2 or 3 trash cans nearest to our house but didn't find what I now suspected I might find sooner or later. Obviously, the next step was Sophia. She could have skipped work and beat me home, or kept me waiting while she had her Aussie kiss with Charles, trying to come up with a good story. I guess the former if Charles was a passing fancy, and the latter if our marriage was over. Happily, it was the former. She was home, and perhaps Charles was a passing fancy. She greeted me earnestly. Daniel, I'm sorry. It wasn't what you think. Charles is going through a divorce and needed someone to talk with. That was all. And what? Look, I want you to tell me, in detail, with dates and places, what's been going on, especially on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm telling you, Daniel, nothing's been going on. I love you. So this was the first time you dressed especially for him and hid the nail polish from me? You know that was wrong. The two of you hid across town, found to have an intimate lunch followed by an afternoon of intimate time in the house of the guy you wanted to help, where you could offer consolation for his marital worries in private. Make dear Charles feel less unloved out of kindness, but overcoming great personal disgust, hold his hand and give him a hard-on as you reassured his masculine vanity? You make it sound so shabby. It wasn't like that. So tell me how it was then, Sophia. Surely it's not true that nothing happened between you. But nothing did happen. My cell phone rang. As I reached for my cell phone, Sophia said, "Leave it, Daniel. They'll call back." Grabbing the phone, I responded, this conversation isn't going anywhere anyway. You're still in damage control mode. Hello? No, I'm not okay. What was the outcome of that? It would seem so. Okay, let me know. Bye. It was my sister announcing that Charles and his wife just celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary, and there was an allegation against Charles of assault and related pictures of at least 2 naked women posted on the internet. He allegedly got them into his study, kissed them, and went nuts in front of hidden cameras. He was okay up to that point, but then they showed up on an internet site he is suspected to have a part ownership in. It was hushed up, partly because it was all he said, she said, and there was no proof who posted the pictures. One of the women did get a good chunk of money out of Charles, or his wife, no one knows. He owns no property, no business partnerships, and his net worth is about $200,000 and falling. Mine is about $300,000 and rising. Charles is a nice guy, and his wife doesn't understand him, right? Listen, Sophia, I'd love to hear the fairy tale you've concocted, but I've not the patience. I'm going out for a while to lower my blood pressure. I walked back to the door. I'll be back in an hour or two, and then we'll decide what to do. She followed me to the door, repeating her claim of innocence, and I got the door shut in her face. I continued walking in the direction Max and I had been taking to get to our house, checking the trash cans as I went. In the bin on the corner, I hit pay dirt. Under some papers and such, I found a folded newspaper containing a discarded cell phone and a 3-pack of unopened condoms. I had a nice coffee in a local cafe and even indulged in a real cream puff. I read the paper there to soak up the hour. I figured wifey needed to come to her senses or to cook up a better story. I strolled back to the house, took a pee in the hall toilet, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat down with my readied wife. So, where were we? I believe you had floated the fiction that nothing happened. You were loyal and true, helping the lovelorn, which is a group you may soon be joining if you don't tell me exactly what's been going on. But I told you, nothing happened. Nothing's been going on. Look, you silly cow, vague denials are not convincing. Stuff has been going on for a month or more. So tell me what's happening. I really don't know if you have anything to gain by doing so, but I assure you, you have nothing to lose. As things stand, you're on your way out the door. I know more than you give me credit for, and your story better align with what I do know. All right, I swear nothing happened. I began working with Charles back in March, and I was drawn to him. He has a certain magnetism. At the time, our marriage was going stale, boring, intimate time. Same old story, and I was feeling old. Charles is well off from old money and is connected to everybody who is anybody in this city. He has his problems too, and he began confiding in me. We started going out to lunch on Tuesdays so that we could talk. Certainly, he didn't want his personal troubles to be office gossip. I think I did him some good. He was really broken up. His wife was kissing around with unsuitable people. Oh, indeed. It's much better when they kiss around with suitable people, preferably their betters. Much less painful for the wrong spouse. That's not what I mean. Possibly, but it's what it sounded like. So, old father figure Charles began to woo you with that "my wife doesn't understand me" line. Where did he take you to dinner, and what did he give you for gifts? He never gave me anything of consequence. So what little token things did he give you? Some perfume. Took me to a department store the second or third week to help him find a gift for his wife and wanted my advice. We went into the perfume department. He wanted something she might think was sexy to inspire her and wanted my advice on what scents might do that. I tried half a dozen and finally picked one, but I only said I thought it was very nice for his wife, of course. The next time I saw him, he gave me a bottle of it. It was quite innocent. Right. He suggested perfume for someone you never met. You picked it out one you thought was erotic. He bought it for you and asked you to wear it to connect your body to his face. It was all so innocent that you never mentioned him, your shopping expedition, or the perfume to me. I take that back. You mentioned seeing him greeting your boss with a hug, kiss, and hand-grabbing the butt cheek. You said she laughed and kissed him as though they were once lovers. Your words, not mine. So where is this perfume that your other man gave you? The one that makes you feel like having an Aussie kiss? I'd like to see it. Try it out, actually. I left it at work. So you wore it just for him whenever he took you out because he bought it just for you, and he thought it got you aroused. Knowing why you were putting it on must been exciting. Mustn't bring it home, though, lest hubby find it. Our little secret. I get the picture. Where did he tell you to apply the perfume? I know it must look that way, but I wasn't thinking. I was being kind. I didn't want to hurt him by rejecting him, and he's an older gentleman, so he's not so politically correct as people our age. Again, where did he tell you to apply the stuff? As you know, I don't wear perfume, but I do know where to put it. He told me the usual place on the wrists, the neck, between the breasts. I checked online. He told me correctly. Yes, certainly between your breasts, where he was planning to have his nose at some point. By the way, how much did this bottle cost? Why, I don't. I slammed my hand flat on the table with a smack, and she jumped. Cut the crap. Of course you know. He bought it right in front of you, and had to have mentioned it to you. He wanted to impress you. So how much? Sophia's lip quivered. It was outrageous, $300 for a small bottle. Now we're starting to see the bigger picture in context. Sophia, what you've been doing is called letting the small head do the thinking. In your case, your vertical lips were whispering to you. But do continue. This was still in July, wasn't it? When did he get on to you about your clothing? My God, how? Just go on. Also, you need to tell me when and where you went with him. Well, the first 2 times it was just to a little Italian restaurant in Southbridge Town. After that, mostly in the neighborhood where you saw us. It was the end of July. He said it was where it was happening. He and a number of others had been buying properties there, and the area was taking off. I met him at the Blue Pomegranate. It's a Mexican fusion place. He gave me the perfume at lunch. I dabbed some on, and later the waitress asked what the scent was that I was wearing that had her a bit aroused. Did he get there first? She nodded. Yes. So he primed a waitress to say that when she, picked up the plates? She was clearing the table? No, he wouldn't have done that. I mean, how could he? Maybe he did. I mean, now that you mention it, I really can't imagine a waitress coming out with something like that right out of the blue. He did tell me a lot of crap about how I stirred him and such. And about your choice of clothing? Geez, that was nothing. Shortly after I first met him in the office, I think we had lunch right around the corner from work. Part of his patter of flattery and good advice, you know. I had such nice legs and all, but I would benefit from a more professional look. I should wear dresses and skirts, but bare-legged with sandals and button-down blouses with a bit of jewelry. Anyway, the lunches were nothing much. We sort of commiserated with one another about life. Be specific. What did he lead you into venting about? Well, where my career was going. I mean, Daniel, Charles is a talent spotter in the city. He got my boss her job, and he's helped lots of other people get ahead. He connects talented people in one organization with an opportunity in other organizations. He was telling me about a job with the art museum that would be perfect for me. It was gossip, of course, but real inside stuff. They don't advertise the good jobs on Monster, you know? And as he had confided in me about his marital troubles, I mentioned what you had said about our marriage and whatnot. Whatnot? Well, you know, us having a chilly love life right now and difficulties talking about important stuff, not seeing eye to eye, that sort of thing. Excellent conversation. He told you, in effect, stick with me, babe, and he'll get you a better job with more money. And you responded by telling him that you hadn't had good intimacy in ages. I bet his ears perked up when he heard that. Her eyes watered up a bit. Daniel, you turn everything into something sordid. It wasn't like that at all. He was thoughtful and kind. He is a master, Sophia. Everything he said had 2 sides. On one side, he was kind and protective, but on the other hand, it was demanding and controlling. We are both seeing the truth, like a coin having 2 sides. Anyway, go on. The first lunch date across town, The blue pomegranate was so-so. Well, after lunch, we took a cab back across town. When we were a couple of blocks from the office, the driver damn near took a corner on two wheels, and I flew across the seat and landed in a jumble on Charles. I was embarrassed to fall all over him like that, you know? Charles had the driver stop the cab right there, and we got out and walked around the block to the office. I can read her like a book. You skipped something just now, didn't you? When you were thrown on top of Charles. It's not important, but, well, he did kiss me. But look, it wasn't premeditated or anything, just, being tossed into him. Almost a reflex, a thing of the moment. That's all. I stood up. Well, they'll see you after supper. I'm going out to eat by myself. There's no point in continuing this conversation if you keep trying to hide what you were doing. If you're still here when I get back, we can try for the last time for complete honesty. What do you mean, Daniel? I called the dog and put his collar on. Good day for the dog, all that walking. Bad day for me. He'll tell you what happened. You silly cow. Yes, you slid on top of him. You ever have a cab swerve like that for no reason? I never have. As he got in, he slipped the cabbie 20 and a note telling him to take a hard left turn towards the end of the ride. It was planned. You skidded across the seat onto him. He kissed you quite firmly and deliberately, and after a shocked pause, you kissed back with tongue work. The next thing you knew, he had his hands on your other places, right? She was horrified. I mean, how? My educated guess was right on the mark. My God, Daniel, why am I talking to you like you were there? I'm genuinely weirded out over this. Come on, Max, let's take a walk. This house is more than full enough of half-truths and outright lies with Sophia here. Max had a nice walk, and I stopped at a small diner where the floor was clean enough for the dog to lay down. Not that he cared. They had a delicious lamb shank with fresh fava beans on special. When I got back, I poured another small glass of wine for myself and one for Sophia while giving the dog the shank bone. I sprawled out in the chair opposite her. So, where were we? Oh yes, you were trying to hold back the knowledge of your first wet tongue kiss with Charles and his first grope of your whatnot, plus how sexually excited you were. Now, I mentioned before that you were to tell me everything, and you're not doing that. I'm serious. I want the bald truth, or you can get your bum out the door right now. You can spend the next few weeks at Charles' house. Elizabeth is in France for the next few weeks, or you can live there as a maid with benefits for all I care. Am I clear on that? Yes, Daniel, very clear. How do you know about Caroline Wright? I don't know how you know all this, but that's what happened. We were both shocked at our instinctive reactions and stumbled over each other with apologies. We were practically at the office, and like I said, Charles had the cabbie pull over so we could regain our composure before we went into the building. There was a long pause, I suppose, where she was deciding if there was anything she dared not tell me. The week before last, we went to a really great West Indian French restaurant, really just a hole-in-the-wall place. So now you are at the point where you are voluntarily marking yourself with a scent and wearing clothes he approves of that give him easy access to your holes. Is this the week with the undergarments? Or did that come earlier and you forgot to mention it? She burst out crying and ran out of the room, sobbing as she went. I sipped some wine and started to read the paper. She came out of the bathroom about 10 minutes later, readied with a snivel or two. I am so sorry. You knew everything all along. Why didn't you say something and stop me? You never let on. Go on. The West Indian jerk chicken neon lights, cheap tables and chairs, really spicy, great-tasting food. Yes, well, I don't know what brought it up, but Charles had been talking earlier about women willingly wearing uncomfortable underwear like girdles in the old days, and nowadays, bras and thongs and such. What cheap, uncomfortable things they were, that most women didn't know what really good underwear was. Well, and I thought it would be the old line, take off your underpants in the restaurant line. Charles is an original, all right, something new under the sun. He reached into his briefcase and handed me a very elegant box, saying, "Here, this is for you. Try them out and let me know which is more comfortable, these, or what you have on now." Of course, I started to open it. Don't open it here. This is too shabby a place for these, as he tapped his finger on the box. Since I'm trying to be honest, we necked like teenagers in the cab back to the office. I knew I had a glum look on my face. Sophia, this is really hard for me to kiss and tell. It's not so easy to hear it either, but we need the catharsis to heal. Go on. By the way, tell me about the panties. What was so special and the price? Honest, he's never been here. Honest. He dropped me off at the office in the underpants. I've never seen anything like them. They don't look the least bit erotic. Nothing like that at first glance. Plain even, but pure, tightly woven silk, carefully hand-stitched. You forgot to check the inside. The price was still on them. 100 each, and there were 3 pairs in the box, 1 red, 1 black, and 1 white. They were sort of like very short-legged boxer shorts, beautifully made, and in the crotch, there was a silk pocket, and you could slide a cotton handkerchief-like thing into the pocket if you needed them to be more absorbent. I tried a pair on at the office, and they were heavenly, like I was naked underneath, only rubbing like silk against me. Of course, they were silk. I couldn't stand it. I was so hot I came home and attacked you that night. I don't remember seeing them. Be serious. I couldn't let you see them. I changed in the office and kept them in the office. The price wasn't left in the box by accident, you fool. He wanted to impress you. People with money to bun, it's important for the seduction that you be impressed. Go on to the next part. So 2 weeks ago, we went to lunch at a French restaurant over on 2nd and Olive. I know you're going to ask, yes, I chose the white ones. I doubt that you chose them. You sure Charles didn't express a preference for the white ones? Well, maybe now that you mention it, he did. Anyway, it didn't matter, right? I thought he played her like the master. He was always asking for more. Always something that would be easy to say yes to get her in the habit of agreeing, expecting to do things to please him. This is when he asked you to show him that you were wearing his gift there in the restaurant. She went orbital. Jesus H. Christ, Daniel, did you put a hidden mic in my purse? I made sure nobody saw that, and he never mentioned or emailed or spoke about it. Answer me, goddammit. How did you know? There's no microphone. Go look in your various purses, see if there's a bug. Seeing is believing. As we mentioned earlier, I have a very active male mind, and I am very good at deductive logic, that's all. You barely understood what he said to you. I understand what he was doing. All right, whatever. We were sitting side by side in the booth, me on the inside. He asked to see his gift, so I looked around and lifted my dress only high enough for him to see my underpants. See, you interpreted the word his gift to be the underpants he gave you. Equally, his words referred to your glory hole, which was going to be his gift from you. 2 sides to everything. Your conscious mind understood one side, but subconsciously, you weren't innocent. You understood where things were going. I don't think so. Oh crap. Maybe you're right. Anyway, we had a lovely prix-fixe lunch. The waiter spoke French, as does Charles, by the way, and he ordered for me. It was one of the best meals I've ever had. Mostly, we talked about the Democratic Party and what was really going to happen this fall and the likelihood that you would be working for the art museum by then. We did talk about that. It looks like a sure thing, even though you haven't been interviewed for the job. And you had fun in the booth after all that, peeking under skirt, eating sophisticated food, and talking. I am ashamed of myself, but it wasn't fun, more like heavy petting. Sicko. No, not at all. Very erotic. Fun in public, but hidden. A shared secret adventure. Further practice for you to submit to him. I bet he was ready again by the time you got in the cab. I had to, as you apparently already know. By the way, when was he going to put in a good word for you at the art museum? And did he mention who his contact was? She visibly relaxed at what she saw as an innocuous question. Actually, he did, just after we ordered. Next week, Wednesday, he was having lunch with Sam Williams. He's the person to see. So you would have to be nice to him today. And as a correction, you were hoovering Charles. The guy at the museum is Tomas Hoving. It irritates him to no end to be called Tom, and Tomas would never go to lunch with an idiot like Charles. I have lunch with Tomas and Howard Goldman in a local pub 3 or 4 times a year. I offered to introduce you, if you recall, but you wouldn't have it. Well, we all value stuff we pay for more than what we can have for free. By the way, you didn't mention his gift of the nail polish. When did he give it to you? It arrived at the office 2 weeks ago. And the note that came with it, Daniel, how could you know about the note? Sophia, the note. Well, he knew I didn't wear nail polish, but he asked as a favor for me to wear it today. I just painted it on last night. Just on your toes so you could wear shoes and hide it from me. A sheepish nod from wifey. Well, good. Another visible sign of your willingness to wear his mark and surrender to him completely. What did he tell you you were going to do this afternoon? Well, just that he had some antiques that had been in his family for 250 years and in a beautifully restored house. The museum borrowed several of the better pieces of furniture for the Rococo Chippendale special exhibit a few years ago. They have offered him over $1 million for the desk alone. Well, of course, I was interested. I mean, how often do you get a chance to see something like that? And what did you think you would have to do to please Charles and get the good word in with Hoving? Well, that's just it. I was calling a halt to it all. Him forcing me to please him was just the end. I mean, I'm married, after all. Nothing more was going to happen. I swear I was done with him just as soon as lunch was over. So sweet, innocent you. You left the house this morning planning to end the affair before it exceeded Bill Clinton's definition of intimacy. Yet you told the office you would be gone for the rest of the day. To prepare to give Charles the bad news that it was all over between the two of you, you went to work prepared exactly as Charles asked you to, with shining scarlet red nails on your toes, with matching red silk underpants, with his perfume on your breasts. Face it, you were planning to spend the afternoon alone with him in his house. You had already exchanged French kisses, let him play with your body, you bought some condoms to use at his house, and now you think me dumb enough to believe you weren't planning to screw him. I didn't have any condoms. Oh yes, you did. That's why you about crapped yourself when the guy said he gave you a cell phone and it was in your purse. If I had looked in your purse, I'd have seen this. I pulled the discarded cell phone out of my pocket. And these. I reached back into my pocket and tossed an unopened 3-pack of condoms, lubricated and ribbed. Just like a good little whore. Be prepared. Daniel, how? Where? From the trash can on the corner of 6th and Sycamore where you dumped them when you got out of the cab. That's where they're from. They were tucked together inside a folded newspaper. Look, you dumb whore. The son of a bitch was setting you up, and you eagerly allowed the old fart to seduce you. Oh, yes, you probably see the house, but in his study, in front of hidden video cameras, you would have had a pork infusion from that rotter, the least of the blue bloods. Then if you tried to break off with him, he would have had pictures that would ruin you and your marriage. In a month or two, when he had screwed you, he could do any damn thing he wanted with you. Oh, I can't believe that. He was really nice. Sophia, he's played you like a violin from the start. He got your sympathy, flattered you, promised you entry to what you wanted. You have your nose pressed firmly against the windows of the houses of the upper class, and he knows it. He worked diligently, getting you to yield more and more control to him. The worst thing is you decided that you wanted what you thought he could deliver, and were willing to have sex with him and dump me to get it. You knew very early on where this was going, didn't you? No, I really didn't. It was so gradual, each thing was a little more than before. But nothing. I was a drag on your ambitions, holding you back from the right people. Those people run things. You think we are trash. Let him cover you with his underpants, wear them for him. Feel how the other half lives. Kisses, forced but impulsive, accidental, next time given as a right. The outrage of almost having a public fornication in a restaurant, for God's sake. Each previous liberty now is due. Sucking him off the first of the 3 holes you were going to give him. Well, he didn't get you to his house to have sex with you today, but that's not his fault, is it? You were willing and eager until you panicked when you saw me. No, it wasn't like that. It was like I was under a spell. I love you, Daniel. You think so, but you want to have sex with Charles. You think living with me will prevent you from reaching your goals. I'm too rough, too working class. I'm your starter husband. You want to be in society. That was Charles' hook. You swallowed it, hiding it from me because you knew if I found out, it would end our marriage, and it wasn't convenient for you to make the break. Not just yet, but I don't love Charles. I love you. You were dumb enough to think that Charles would divorce his wife and enjoy having you as his trophy wife. You would inherit a pot of money when he kicked off. You never checked. Charles has less than we have. He owns no property, none. He has a spendthrift trust. The 250-year-old furniture is crap. It's his wife's. His wife of 30 years had all the money and prestige. He's the joke of Bridgetown society, tolerated only because his wife gives out tons of money. The guy is a master, willing to screw anything that comes his way. The only guy in town with a part ownership in a spicy website that lost money. Well, guess what? Remember what I said about the wealthy screwing the wrong sort of people? You're not society, so his wife really doesn't care if he screws you. You are an unsuitable person. They both know he's not going to marry you. You're just the right sort for him to screw, like his wife screwing her personal trainer. Fun for her, no consequences. He'll quit when she wants him to. You picked the wrong one this time, but take heart. Learn from this, and you may hit gold next time. I have to tell you that, like an idiot, I did forgive her indiscretion, but I certainly didn't forget it. Bill Hoving interviewed her, and she did get the job at the art museum. After Thanksgiving, we talked about starting a family, but before it could happen, Bill mentioned to me, as a friend, who had told him the truth of what happened between Sophia and Charles, that Sophia was perhaps enjoying a dalliance with a board member, Brian Fields. He swore me not to give him as the source of the rumor. Fields is distantly related to old money, but he grew up rough. His money actually comes from demolition and salvage yards. Brian was recently divorced and genuinely wealthy. I didn't fool around this time. I paid an investigator to look into it and got a batch of pictures them kissing. Him with his knee pressed between her legs and with his hand on her bum, them walking with their arms around each other. I mentioned the lack of explicit pictures. Daniel, unless they're truly nuts, screwing in public view or something like that, you're talking about huge costs, $20,000 to $50,000. First, you have to figure where and when they are going to do it, then you have to get the cameras in place, and then get the pictures out, and then get the cameras back. You can't believe what it costs paying someone reliable to break into houses, install cameras, and such. Probably be cheaper to hire someone to tail them. Give me a break. Look at them kissing with his hands on her bum, they're screwing each other. So I handed her divorce papers. The pictures were invaluable. She thought she was close to reeling him in, and the scandal would end her hopes. In exchange for her walking out with nothing but the clothing in her closet, I agreed to a quiet divorce and to never say a bad word about her, Charles, or Fields. What little regret we both had was for the departure of the dreams we once shared. I also agreed she could live with me for a maximum of 6 months, so the divorce would not upset her apple cart. Fields proposed, and she was gone in 3 months. You might ask why I didn't kick her out the door and piss on her head when she was lying in the street. The answer is that I try very hard not to hang on to anger. It corrodes the soul and can dominate your life. When it was clear that we had no life together, I was happy to get her out of my life and move on. It would do me no conceivable good to carry on a vendetta. Frankly, nobody in town cared one way or the other. But why introduce needless discord into your life? There are things I will fight for, but a wayward wife is not one of them. Plus, giving her half of our assets would have cost me about $150,000. After the divorce, I focused on my work and my dog, Max. My business thrived as the economy picked up, and I found myself increasingly engaged with restoring historic buildings. I even finished my book on restoring decorative plasterwork with Robert. It was well received in the niche community of restoration experts, and I started getting more prestigious contracts. Life went on. I started attending more social events, not because I wanted to, but because it was good for business. I met new people, made new friends, and, slowly, the wounds from my marriage healed. I even started dating again, though I was more cautious this time around. One day, about a year after the divorce, I ran into an old college friend, Rachel. We got to talking, and it turned out she had also gone through a rough patch in her personal life. We started seeing each other more often, and over time, our friendship blossomed into something more. Rachel was different from Sophia in many ways. She was grounded, honest, and genuinely kind. As Rachel and I grew closer, I realized that I had found someone who truly understood me and appreciated me for who I was. We shared common interests, and she even had an appreciation for my work in restoration. We took things slow, but eventually, we moved in together. Life with Rachel was simple and we enjoyed each other's company, took long walks with Max, and explored new places together. She became my partner in every sense of the word, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly happy and at peace. Reflecting on my past, I realized that the experiences I had gone through had shaped me into the person I was. They taught me valuable lessons about trust, resilience, and the importance of surrounding myself with genuine people. My journey had been tough, But it led me to a better place where I could finally start anew and build a future filled with hope and love.